one-day jump in cases. In Arizona, daily infections rose by more than 6%. The Trump campaign says it's working with officials in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to protect against the virus at tomorrow's campaign rally. They say the president will be socially distancing, but that attendees can just wear masks and use hand sanitizer if they feel that's necessary. Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn plans to introduce legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday to commemorate the day slaves were emancipated. Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee has introduced companion legislation in the House. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. It's now 6:19 on Wall Street. Coronavirus cases in Florida, Texas, and Arizona, they continue to rise. California also registering its biggest one-day jump in cases. Joining us now to discuss, Professor Amish Adalja from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Professor, a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for being with us this morning. How worried should we be about this?
It all depends on what's going on at the hospital level, because you have to remember that this virus is going to be with us, and we're going to see periodic flares. And what we really need to do is make sure that our hospitals are not under stress. And when you see record numbers of hospitalizations, that does become worrying in places like Arizona, places like Texas and Florida. And you want to make sure that those hospitals are adequately resourced and they don't get into a crisis.
Are they at this point? And what's the reading from those places?
We're not hearing about we're hearing that they have record hospitalizations, but we're not hearing about capacity being threatened. There has been some information coming out of Arizona about those hospitals and their ICUs being stressed, not to the point of crisis, but we want to make sure that they don't get there. And the only way that is going to happen is if we start to get the case counts down and the percent positive of testing down by doing more testing, finding more cases, and getting involved in the outbreak chains of transmission early before they end up spilling into hospitals. And this is going to be the story as we move through this pandemic. It's going to be different states at different times, and we have to be vigilant.
Are you satisfied that adequate mitigation efforts are underway in those states?
I do think that there are varying degrees of preparation going on and mitigation going on. However, the key has to be that do you have enough case contact investigators to find every case, to interview that person and figure out their contacts and isolate those contacts. And then the new cases that you get only come from those contacts, not from these undetected chains of transmission. And I'm not satisfied that that's happening, because I don't think you would have gotten to the point that you're getting in Arizona, where the percent positive of tests, meaning how many the tests that you're sending that are returning positive, continues to increase there, which tells you that they're not getting a handle on this. So that is something that I'm worried about.
Especially with a state like Arizona, you got to wonder if that's a population that's especially vulnerable.
Right. We do know that people are affected by this virus in different ways, and if it is older individuals, those with other medical problems that are getting infected, that's going to be what ends up in the hospital, because young people, when they get it, aren't really representative in the hospitalized cases. So if you are a state that has a population of more people vulnerable to severe disease, it's even more important that you keep control of the virus than in other states.
Do you get the sense that there's a complete lack of understanding on the part of some of the public officials in those places over the exponential nature of a virus like this and the infection rate?
I do think people think because they might have been spared early on, or that we seem to getting better control now in June than we were in March as a nation, that this was a time that you could act as if the virus wasn't there. And I think that starts with politicians and trickles its way down to the general public. And I think it's important to know that it doesn't have to be a false alternative of economic shutdowns versus the virus going rampant. You have to actually do things in a measured way and not act as if the virus isn't there. And in order to do that, we have to make it safe for people to go out. And the way to do that is to have high degrees of diagnostic testing, as well as case contact investigators, and keep a very close eye at hospital capacity numbers, and then you move forward. And I think you can do that, and many states are doing that, but you cannot allow things to get out of control, and spiral out of control, and not have the resources to control it, or you're going to end up in a situation where people are going to be afraid to go out, where your cases are going to be rising, and outbreak chains of transmission are going to go undetected and spill into the hospital.
In those states that we've mentioned, can we say that this is a second wave, or is it maybe just the first wave continuing?
This really is just the first wave continuing in many of these places. They were not hit hard early, so they really didn't experience a full first wave. And when things started to open back up, they didn't have the resources in place in order to be able to deal with the number of cases that they were going to get. You have to remember it's going to be inevitable that when people socially interact, that cases occur. That's not going to be anything surprising because the virus is still there and it's going to thrive on social interaction. The key is, can you control those cases by having adequate case contact investigators, diagnostic testing, and hospital capacity? And that's why some states went slower than other states. And you're really now seeing the results of that, where if you didn't have the infrastructure in place, and then the cases started increasing, they could rapidly become out of control.
Professor, a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Professor Amish Adalja from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health was with us this morning. As we looked at markets, right now we're seeing green on the screen. The Dow futures, they are up 252 points right now. S&P futures about 27 points higher ahead of the cash open on Wall Street this triple witching day, where we can expect increased volatility for this Friday. NASDAQ E-mini futures right now, they are up 79 points. And you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It started with an Illinois lawsuit against McDonald's over pandemic working conditions, and now there is a complaint targeting both the corporation and a franchisee before the National Labor Relations Board. They stand accused of firing the worker because he joined the lawsuit and testified in state court. He says he'd been told in late May he'd be retained after the restaurant reopened, but after he testified, was fired. The pandemic lockdowns are lifting, summer is almost here, and so is demand for fuel. There's been a sharp increase in demand on the East Coast. Most oil refiners had reduced output in the spring because demand cratered, so now we're seeing oil prices back above $40 a barrel. They're up about $1.25 to a dime above $40. Stock futures have some fuel today for a rally after word China has promised to speed up U.S. farm purchases. That's part of the partial trade deal between the two nations. S&P futures are up 32, NASDAQ futures 90, Dow futures up 291 points. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
The wait is over. Tonight, it's Tottenham v Man United in a top draw matchup. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
Game on. So, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining despite the latest readings on coronavirus infections. Cases in Florida, Texas, and Arizona continue to rise. Hospitalizations in the Sunshine State reached the highest level ever. Francis Suarez is mayor of Miami.
If you look at all of the areas in the world and in the U.S. where the death rate goes from 3% to 8%, 12%, 14%. It's all based on hospitals being overwhelmed. And so we're closely monitoring that to make sure that that doesn't happen in the city.
And Texas reported its biggest one-day jump in cases as well. So did Arizona, where daily infections increased by more than 6%. California will now require masks for residents after it also reported a record rise in cases.
U.S. stocks poised for a gain on the week, but Ray Dalio says the future for equities is bleak. The co-founder of Bridgewater Associates warns of a possible lost decade for stocks as corporate profit margins shrink. Belita Ong, CEO of Dalton Investments, is hoping he's wrong.
I really hope Ray Dalio is incorrect, but we are in a market that feels very much like a bubble, or at least at very dangerous levels.
Volatility could be high today thanks to quadruple witching. That's when options and futures on both indexes and equities expire on the same day, traditionally leading to high volumes and large price swings.
And we have news on the Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China. Sources tell us Beijing plans to accelerate purchases of American farm goods in order to comply with the agreement. China is asking state-owned agricultural buyers to make all efforts to meet the deal following talks with the U.S. in Hawaii this week.
And finally, it's been a wild day in Europe for Wirecard. Shares down more than 40% after news that the company is missing more than $2 billion in cash. Two Asian banks that were supposed to be holding the money deny even having a business relationship at all with Wirecard. In the past 2 days, the German company has seen its stock slide 75%.
Well, let's see how the broader market's faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are higher by 25 points right now. Dow futures up 237. NASDAQ futures a gain of just about 80 points on this quadruple witching day. 10-year is down 3/30 seconds, yield 0.71%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 2.7%, up $1.05 to $39.89 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5%, up $8.20. 1739.30 gets you an ounce of gold on the COMEX. The euro is at 1.1202 against the dollar, and the yen at 106.92. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
It's 6:33 on Wall Street. Let's get news from around the world this morning, and we say good morning to Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Good morning, John. It is welcome news from New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Based on the really good indicators we've seen today and for days and days before that, I'm very comfortable now saying that we will start phase 2 on Monday, June 22nd.
That announcement sends up to 300,000 people back to work for starters. Phase 2, including the restart of outdoor dining at restaurants, personal services like salons, and indoor shopping with some restrictions. But any bar or restaurant that violates those reopening rules in the state risks its license being suspended or being shut down. In New Jersey, shopping malls could be open again as early as a week from Monday. Governor Phil Murphy says their numbers are improving, but the virus has taken a huge toll.
We are reporting with the heaviest of hearts the loss of another 38 New Jerseyans to COVID-19 related complications. Our statewide total is now 12,800 lost lives.
And when those malls reopen, workers and shoppers will still need to wear masks and food courts will still be closed. As more states start to see their coronavirus cases on the rise, New York's numbers are going down. Now, Governor Andrew Cuomo is considering measures to protect the state.
People coming into their state needed to be quarantined for 14 days. Now the tables have turned 180 degrees, and we're considering it for New York.
Remember, in March, Florida had restricted travel from New York. The Supreme Court has upheld legal protections for young immigrants. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program is intact for now. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio welcoming that ruling.
Dreamers who are part of our city, part of our country, need to know that they will have a bright future here.
The court's decision doesn't guarantee the so-called dreamers will be protected long term. The Trump administration can still try to dismantle that program. Several New York City council members are calling for the removal of a statue of Thomas Jefferson in City Hall. They argue in a letter to the mayor that the slave owner is a reminder of the injustices that plague communities of color. New Jersey's assembly has voted to decriminalize marijuana. Instead of being arrested, violators will face a $50 fine for possession of up to 2 ounces. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. It's coming up on 6:36 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Statschauer.
Good morning, John Tucker. The two sides in the baseball labor dispute clearly a lot closer to an agreement. The owners have agreed to give the players their full salary for games played in the shortened season without fans. The union, who at first wanted its players to get paid for 114 games, come down to 70. But Commissioner Rob Manfred thought they had a deal to play 60. Union Chief Tony Clark says he never signed off on 60, denies there was a tentative agreement. Manfred says 70 games is impossible due to the calendar and MLB's desire to not extend the season. You would think they could compromise somewhere in between, but so far they have not. We continue to hear about football players getting the virus and informal workouts. 13 cases at the University of Texas. Several Houston Texans and Dallas Cowboys have gotten it, like Zeke Elliott. Dr. Anthony Fauci says NFL players will need to be in a bubble. He finds it hard to imagine the NFL being able to play games this fall. If and when they do, Jamal Adams wants to be on a different team. The Jets' Pro Bowl safety wants a new contract. The Jets have dragged their feet. Adams has only played 3 seasons. He can't be a free agent until 2022 at the earliest, but Adams has asked to be traded. The recent MLB draft was shortened to only 5 rounds, so a lot of players went undrafted, like Boston College outfielder Joe Swassey. He has signed with the Mets. His father, Thomas, is a U.S. congressman from Long Island. The 152nd run of the Belmont Stakes is on for tomorrow in New York. Was always the last leg of the Triple Crown. Now it's the first. 10 horses, no fans, a shortened course, 1.8 miles. New York-bred horse Tiz the Law is the favorite. John Statschauer, Bloomberg Sports. John.
All right, John, thanks a lot. 6:37 on Wall Street. Some other stories we're watching this morning. JetBlue betting on a big recovery in air travel following the collapse in demand. Here with details is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It is adding 30 domestic routes, restarting some suspended flights, and extending its premium Mint service to Newark, New Jersey. JetBlue says the new routes, which are concentrated in the New York area but also include Florida and Philadelphia, are geared toward, quote, small signs of a rebound in leisure travel. The additions and the restoration of suspended routes in July and August mean the airline will operate more than half its typical summer capacity. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Charlie. And in other stories this morning, American Airlines has removed a passenger who refused to wear a face covering. The airline also banned him from taking future flights. The passenger, described as a conservative activist, accused American employees of intimidating him. The incident capped a week in which U.S. airlines vowed to step up enforcement of the use of masks. You'll soon be able to go to the movies again. AMC Entertainment, the largest theater chain in the country, will reopen most of its domestic locations on July 15th. AMC expects every major city to allow audiences back in time for Disney's Mulan premiere on July 24th. And 2 NFL shows no longer available on the Dish Network and its Sling TV online service after the parties failed to agree on contract terms. NFL Network and NFL Red Zone are currently unavailable to Dish and Sling subscribers. NFL games accounted for 47 of the 50 most-watched TV shows among all programming during the 2019 season. Slow time for earnings right now, but we do get results from CarMax this morning. Here with a preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Even before the pandemic, CarMax was facing pressure from franchise dealer groups and emerging online sellers. Analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are calling for a 65% plunge in same-store sales in the quarter as economic activity collapsed. Earnings are forecast at about 4 cents a share on revenue of about $2.7 billion. CarMax is the nation's largest retailer of pre-owned cars. It sold more than 830,000 vehicles in fiscal 2020, 3 to 4 times the volume of its nearest competitors. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And ahead on the economic front today, government issues fourth quarter trade data sales. Economists say the current account deficit probably narrowed just before the coronavirus hit the global economy. Here with more, Bloomberg's Vinny Dale Giudice.
The current account is the broadest measure of trade, covering goods, services, and financial transactions. In the fourth quarter of 2019, it registered the smallest deficit in more than 2 years. Since then, the trade situation has worsened, with the pandemic cutting demand and tangling supply chains. In April, for example, trade in goods and services dropped at the lowest in almost a decade. Vinny Dell, Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And ahead of the cash open on Wall Street, the futures in the green this morning. S&P E-mini futures, they're up 23 points, up about 0.75%. The Dow futures up 221 points. That's up 0.9%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life.
You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Get your cook on with Asda. With rollbacks on Hellman's Real Mayonnaise, 705 grams was £2.75, now £2. And a 6-pack of Warburton Sandwich Thins was £1, now 75p. Wham bam, add your lunchtime ham. Find thousands of rollbacks across our stores. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Offers end 1st of July.
We've got a lot of catching up to do.
Hi there, everybody. It's lovely to be with you again.
Over 100 live games in just 6 weeks on Sky Sports. With 64 Premier League and 45 EFL Championship games, everything is still to play for. Scores to sell, relegation to avoid, Europe up for grabs, and the titles to win. Upgrade to Sky Sports today. Requires Sky Sports Premier League and football packs. See sky.com/sports for details.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
While some states are dealing with increasing cases of coronavirus, in New York, there's been a decrease, which has led to a Monday Phase 2 reopening.
When Phase 2 begins on Monday, there will be some very noticeable changes across New York. The mayor said in-store retail sales will resume. Restaurants can reopen with service for outdoor seating. Salons and barbershops can open again as well, and playgrounds will be reopened.
Our estimate is a minimum of 150,000 more workers coming back into the 5 boroughs, into their jobs, as many as 300,000.
Some office workers can return to their workplaces too. There will be capacity restrictions in all of these areas. Steve Kastenbaum, New York.
Family and friends gathered today to honor David Patrick Underwood, a federal law enforcement officer fatally shot while guarding a U.S. courthouse in California. Underwood was killed while policing a federal building in Oakland during recent protests. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. There is a report of a breakthrough in trade negotiations between the U.S. and China. China said to step up U.S. farm purchases after meeting with the U.S. in Hawaii. Plus, talk of stimulus in Europe is sending stocks and U.S. equities higher this morning. U.S. equity futures. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 24 points. Dow futures up 236. NASDAQ futures higher by 77 points. The DAX in Germany up 1%. CAC in Paris and FTSE in London both up 1.3%. 10-year down 230 seconds. Yield 0.71%. 0.71% is the yield on a 10-year Treasury note. NYMEX crude oil up 2.7%, up $1.04, $39.88 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.4%, up $7.40, $17.3850 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1204 against the dollar, and the yen is at 106.94. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy?
Nathan, coronavirus cases still on the rise in some states. Florida now reaching record-level hospitalizations. Arizona's daily infections have spiked by more than 6%. Texas reporting its biggest one-day jump in cases. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar is dropping out of the vice presidential contention, and she's urging Democrat Joe Biden to select a woman of color instead. Minnesota has been in turmoil since the killing of George Floyd by a white Minneapolis police officer. Twitter has again flagged a tweet by President Trump warning that it contained manipulated media, and Facebook removed some Trump-Pence campaign ads saying they included a symbol used by Nazis. The campaign says the upside-down triangle is an emoji. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is now 6:49 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital include President Trump pushing ahead with plans to pack an arena in Tulsa for that first campaign rally in 3 months. The Supreme Court ruling against the White House in its fight to end President Obama's DACA program. And as you heard Amy talk there, Amy Klobuchar taking herself out of the contention to be Joe Biden's running mate. The senator from Minnesota instead says she thinks the Democratic nominee should select a woman of color. Joining us now to discuss these stories, Wendy Schiller, chair of political science at Brown University. Happy Friday, Wendy. Large gathering, enclosed arena, all in Oklahoma. That's on for tomorrow. Of course, President Trump's going to take center stage. Does the event, the fact that it's taking place, does it undercut the intended message of the president?
No, I mean, I think, John, that it really, just shores up what he's been trying to do, which is pivot and tell people that things are getting better and that the worst has passed on coronavirus, and that, in fact, you could be in a big arena. You could even maybe get it, but you'll still be okay. Not everybody will die from it. And it's just like any other kind of big medical disease. I mean, this is what he's selling. He really wants to turn to the economy. The problem is the economy can't get back on its feet if people are still fearful of being in large crowds. So it's a gamble. It's a gamble for the people who are going to go in there without a mask, and it's a gamble for the president.
Has the pandemic changed any Trump supporters' minds on their support for the president?
Somebody always says to me, and I steal this phrase, which is that core Trump supporters will walk over hot coals to vote for him. And I think that loyalty runs deep, it runs strong, and it's going to be incredibly hard to break if it's even possible. So there is some portion of the country that will vote for him no matter what. He knows that. It's not enough to win the election. And that's his big challenge. How do you draw some of those people either back to you from 2016 who become disillusioned for whatever reasons, or to keep those Republicans who call themselves fiscal conservatives and socially more moderate. And he's not doing so well with that latter group. He's also down among white women overall, and he won white women overall in 2016. So he's got some groups that he's really got to do some work with if he wants to secure, re-election.
Wendy, I sense that a battle royale is brewing over whether or not people can send in their ballots through the mail.
Yeah, I mean, this is something, I've been talking about with you and talking about just in general about how the Republicans are really, really good at legal challenges to election results. We've known that for 20 years, and they're gearing up. They've already done this. It's sort of dry runs across the country, and a lot of states are just deciding we're going to make it much easier for people to vote by mail. A, the post office has to be prepared for that, but B, more importantly, the legal team of the Democratic Party has to be prepared in every state, because you can imagine the Trump campaign with all of its resources and money will challenge every vote that comes in by mail and really make it a big issue in the validity of the results of the election.
If Joe Biden was thinking about Amy Klobuchar, he can forget that. So where does it put his campaign?
Well, that's so interesting about Amy Klobuchar's sort of statement or, responses in terms of saying I'm dropping out of VP contention. She says, I'm urging the vice president to pick a woman of color. Of course, that cuts out Elizabeth Warren, another female senator from Amy's competition for president, and also Gretchen Whitmer. And I think if you think about realistic politics, I'm not sure the presidential process has changed so much that you don't want to think about the state the person comes from. Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan, you need to win Michigan to win the presidency. Florida, Val Demings, you need to win Florida to win the presidency, either for Trump or for Biden. So, when you look at it, these dynamics still retain their importance in the presidential contest. Picking somebody from a smaller state, in my own state of Rhode Island, or New Mexico, which is solidly blue, just strategically doesn't make a lot of sense. I just can't see Biden doing it.
You want a game real quick for me who you think the VP pick is going to be?
Well, if it were today, I do think Val Demings might be the number one pick in terms of a colleague of color for VP. Or Gretchen Whitmer, I think, still in the mix. Tammy Baldwin's an outlier from Wisconsin, but it just doesn't look clear to me that the Democrats can win Wisconsin. So why put all your eggs in that basket when it looks much more doable in Michigan or Florida?
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Wendy Schiller, political science professor at Brown University. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. Want to alert listeners to this red headline just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. The CEO of Wirecard, Marcus Braun, is resigning with immediate effect. James Fries has been appointed as interim CEO. This comes after the financial services company reported it is missing more than $2 billion in cash from two Asian banks that were supposed to be holding that money, but now say they didn't have any business relationship at all with Wirecard. News doesn't seem to be doing much for the stock. It is still down 47% in Frankfurt. Time now for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, providing industry partners with commercially focused research and innovation services through its New Jersey Innovation Institute. Learn more at njii.com. Now here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Will the pandemic change the way we shop forever? The lockdown created a boom for online retailers with customers stuck at home. In the UK, online sales as a proportion of all retailing reached a record high of more than 33% in May. Analysts say at least some of that business will remain. Data from companies that have already begun reopening show traffic hasn't immediately returned to normal. Retail and recreation foot traffic in Germany and Austria, which began reopening in April, was still around 10% below the baseline, according to Google mobility data. France was 25% lower after letting its shoppers return in May. Twitter has apologized for testing a new voice feature without support for users who are visually or hearing impaired. The company says in a text tweet it's working on updates to remedy the issue. And Tesla is zeroing in on Austin, Texas as the site for its second U.S. assembly plant. Elon Musk's electric car company would build pickups and crossovers at the facility. Tesla has filed an application in the Austin area for a tax abatement. And that is the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Time now for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. John?
Well, hello again, Nathan. We first spoke to John Dantzler at Torch and Crown Brewery. That was back in April. The pandemic brought his plans to open a brew restaurant in Soho to a screeching halt. Well, John, with New York City slowly reopening now, what are you doing? Are you moving ahead with any degree of confidence?
Confident, I guess there are varying degrees of confidence. I think the sort of grand opening that we once had in mind is not going to be the case. But I've been really encouraged with how the city's reacted and with our reopening plans.
Are you going to be able to have the capacity that means you're going to be able to cover your overhead and actually turn a profit?
Profit is pretty much out of the question for the next few months. We are, I think, break even is the best scenario, but we're confident that we can at least do that.
I got to wonder, is it going to be fun going out again? Am I going to have fun at your place, or people are going to be telling me to, move away and keep my distance?
That's the big question. That's at the crux of it all. I used to wear a suit. I was a trader going to my finance job every day, and the reason I left was that beer is fun, and this is my passion. I've been homebrewing since I was 16 years old. The entire reason we exist is to facilitate good times. You're right. If you walk in and everyone's, all right, stand there, don't stand here, wear a mask, everyone's being in your face about all that, it's pretty tough to have a good time. So we're looking to strike the balance between keeping everyone safe, but allowing free-flowing conversation between different groups, allowing kind of the fun elements of why you go to a bar or a brewery.
All right, John, thanks a lot. I'll remember that. Beer is fun. John Dantzler, owner of Torch and Crown Brewery in downtown Manhattan. Good luck to you. We're going to try to check in again, see how things go over there, as we'll do with many other small businesses in the coming days and weeks. As cities across the country emerge from the pandemic, that is today's Bloomberg Small Business Report. On this Friday, looking at the screen, and it's all green for now. The Dow futures up 233 points. S&P futures 25 points higher. For Nathan Hager, I'm John Tucker. You've been listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
No one at this point, analysts, companies, strategists, portfolio managers, has a great sense for what earnings will be in 2020 or in 2021.
The Fed's focus should be on the real economy, and we'll let financial markets take care of themselves.
What we need to realize is that, we're going to be in a slow growth world for a very long period of time.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with equity futures nicely positive. We're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Farrow, together, of course, with Lisa Abramowitz. Tom Keene, what a confusing week for US-China relations, ending on a positive note for this equity market. This market is still a glass half full equity market.
Well, I'll let you decide if it's a glass half full, glass empty, but it's decidedly range bound. I noticed the bid that's underneath it. You mentioned, John, how futures are up. And yes, I guess phase one is back on, but I have zero confidence in that. It's just interesting to see the back and forth. And it's not just the Bolton papers. It's just the whole back and forth between Beijing and Washington. John, it's a Friday of confusion.
It is a Friday of confusion, a Friday of hope over in Europe as well, Lisa. Hope as these leaders get together and discuss stimulus plans. I think the formal negotiations begin right now. They certainly don't end later today.
No, they don't end, although we might be getting some guidance as far as who's pushing back and how close they are to agreeing on the 750 million euro fiscal stimulus plan that is ongoing right now. It started earlier this morning. The other things I'm watching today, John, I'm looking at the Baker Hughes U.S. rig count, and in particular, this happens at 1 p.m. It's after oil prices have risen 11% so far this week in New York. It'll be interesting to see whether rigs are coming back online in the wake of that. And then this is going to be a day of Fed speak galore. We hear from the Fed's Jay Powell, Eric Rosengren, Loretta Mester, and Randy Quarles, who's going to be talking stress tests, John, which are going to be coming out next week, possibly raising questions about whether the Fed will push back on some of the dividend payments that we've been getting from the big banks.
Haven't we had enough of Fed speak? Tom Keene, aren't we done with Fed speak? I think everyone is chair-powed out after this week.
John, one of the most productive dinners I ever had on this was with the wonderful Richard Berner. years ago. He was at Morgan Stanley at the time before his Treasury public service. And Dr. Bernard said to me, don't you just yearn for the days of quiet, of where there was a speech every,
for the days
4
of quiet
weeks, 6
right
weeks,
now
whatever.
on the Fed front. That's for sure. Let's start a conversation with a man who loves the Fed speakers, Darryl Cronk, Wells Fargo Wealth and Investment Management CIO. Darryl, the resilience of the bid in this market is really, really impressive, given some of the news flow coming from elsewhere. What's your take on that, Darryl?
Yeah, it's a great point, John. Good morning, everyone. So I would say there's three things that are really putting the bid in the market. Number one, technicals. So you now have, for example, the S&P above its 20-day moving average, its 50-day moving average, and its 200-day moving average. So there's good firm support, and of course, it looks like we're going higher this morning. Second, of course, is liquidity, right? We're continuing to push more liquidity, whether it's the SMCCF this week with buying corporate bonds or getting the Main Street lending facility going. Both of those are pushing ever more liquidity into the market. And then the third thing that's backstopping is just better macro data overall. I mean, certainly a lot of the retail sales numbers, some of the housing data, all that stuff, consumer sentiment has really backstopped, at least in the near term, higher equity prices, and equities seem to want to go higher.
Darryl, you know how this works, though. Expectations go higher, then all of a sudden the data can't beat the expectations. Are we getting to that point? Do you see the inflection point starting to form?
Maybe not quite yet, but I think that's a real risk, John, as we move out into Q3 and Q4. Right now, we're kind of living off of this sugar high of coming off of those week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter lows of the April, May data. So I do think, though, as you move out in the second half of the year, the likelihood that expectations can continue to go parabolically higher and then data can deliver is a real risk. We think growth kind of stabilizes here, and as was talked about earlier, it's a tough slog here for a while. I mean, we've by no means repaired all the damage to the labor markets and the small business segment and the economy. So equities, there is a risk equities can get ahead of themselves here a little bit from a price and valuation standpoint.
Darryl Cronk, Tom Keene, good morning. Wonderful to have you on with us. The basic theme this week for us has been strategists talking about a bridge out to 2021, even a bridge out too far to 2022. What's on that bridge? What is the construction? What are the foundations, the things that allow you or anybody else to ignore 2020 and look out to the future?
Yeah, Tom, it's a great point. We're getting that question a lot. We just launched our mid-year outlook. We called it Recession, Recovery, and Resilience. We think investors have to have resilience out into next year. Obviously, earnings matter, and a lot of people have written off 2020 earnings. We think for the S&P, you're going to come in somewhere around $115, which is obviously extremely low, 30% contraction from 2019 levels, and then probably recover in 2021 to somewhere around $145 to $150. Still not back to the 2019 highs, but that puts you somewhere around 21 and a half times earnings for next year. It's important to remember, multiples are going to be high here as you go through this recovery. If you go back to 1992, 2009, all of those experienced exceedingly high multiples when you look forward simply because of where we were coming off of on the data.
So, Darryl, I want to talk a little bit about the rally that we saw in U.S. equities after there were some positive developments between the U.S. and China on trade talks. Have trade tensions between the U.S. and China been holding stocks back at all?
It's a great point, Lisa. I'm not sure that it's really been holding them back. Trade has kind of taken a backseat to everything else going on. What we do expect, though, is, we're less than 140 days out now to the November elections. The rhetoric on China and taking a tough stance on China is going to be fodder for this election, and it's going to be fodder for both sides. President Trump will continue to push hard on China, and we think Vice President Biden will attempt to take a tough stance on China because it's politically palatable for both sides right now. So I wouldn't expect a lot of progress. In fact, what we're really hoping for is you get a lot of rhetoric back and forth about being tough on China, but hopefully very few actions, meaning more punitive actions, because certainly the number one and number two economies in the world fighting back and forth have capital market repercussions.
Daryl, I want to talk a little bit about John's point, too. He was saying this glass half full market, and I think that aptly connects the dots with what we're seeing. We see some positive development. Stocks go up. We see a negative development with respect to virus counts accelerating around the country and in Beijing, and stocks dip down a little bit and then recover. What do you attribute to that? Is it just all the Fed and nothing but the Fed?
It is a lot of the Fed. I mean, the Fed backstop is powerful. Let's not, have any illusions about that. But I do think that there's a little bit more. People are kind of playing that early cycle recovery playbook. So you're seeing people be more, take a stronger stance on risk assets overall. We're catching a bid in a lot of the credit spread markets. High yield has gotten a strong bid. Commodity prices have continued to be resilient and move higher. So it's not just equities. It's that whole risk on trade as people believe that the worst of the economic data and the worst of the trough may in fact be behind us now.
What do you do with the big companies? I mean, we've got the Apple Developer Conference. I believe it starts Monday and all that. And, they've all got their each individual stories as well. But how does Wells Fargo position, I should say, with the wonder stocks?
Yeah, so if you were to say overall, Tom, what we like is we still like domestic over international. We very much like large and mid-cap stocks over small. We still think the fundamentals are not particularly good and small. And within large caps, we still think you've got to have a bias towards growth and some cyclical areas. So, for example, we still think it's infotech. We still think it's communication services. We still like discretionary, and we like healthcare here. What we would fade is energy, materials, industrials, those types of names. Growth is going to come at a premium here, and so people will pay up for growth, even if it's only incremental growth at this point. And we think you'll get that in that large cap space and in those sectors I just referenced.
Hey, Daryl, great to catch up with you, sir, at the end of the week. My best to you and the team. Daryl Cronk there of Wells Fargo, thank you. Tom Keene, domestic over international, pushing back against the grain of the last several weeks, that's for sure. So many people starting to think about Europe in a more constructive way. The why? Because they truly believe that this time European leaders will get their act together and do what is needed for the Union. Tom, that video conference today is the beginning of an intense month-long set of negotiations to finally try and get something over the line. And still, there are 4 big holdout countries.
Yeah, no question about it. Wolfgang Muncho on a bit ago, John Farrow, and he really mentioned the intransigence of the Netherlands. He constantly circled back away from the stars of the debate, Lagarde, Merkel, Macron, the others, to what will the Netherlands do?
The frugal 4 pushing back. Lisa Abramowitz, Christine Lagarde, the ECB president, trying to put some pressure on these politicians to get them to do what she thinks is right. The problem is that Christine Lagarde and this ECB is not putting any pressure on fiscal policymakers to do more because they're keeping this bond market wide open.
And this has been the struggle, and it's not just in Europe, it's also in the U.S. The more that the central bank does, the more the pressure is taken off some of the fiscal policymakers to take immediate action. And there's a huge question about any reluctance on the part of fiscal policymakers not implementing further plans, how much that's going to hinder a recovery that people are already pricing in, John.
That was the old German argument, that's for sure. It's changed a little bit in the last 10 years. In this market right now, from New York this morning, good morning to you all. We advanced by 26 points on the S&P 500, up around about 0.8%. Next up on this program, we take it down to Washington, D.C. to catch up with Kevin Cirilli as we mark Juneteenth. That's coming up next from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. While some areas like New York, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. continue to slowly phase in their reopening plans, other areas are seeing surges in coronavirus cases. Alabama's caseload continues to increase, alarming healthcare officials in the Montgomery area. Dr. Don Williamson is president of the Alabama Hospital Association and tells ABC News that ICUs are at capacity and more action needs to be taken.
All I know is that if we don't begin to see a decline in transmission, we're never going to have to worry about a second wave because we haven't gotten out of the first wave.
Montgomery's mayor has issued an executive order requiring groups of 10 or more to wear masks, while Alabama's governor, Kay Ivey, has lifted COVID-19 restrictions. President Trump will hold his first large-scale public campaign rally tomorrow since the pandemic began. Now, that arena seats 20,000 people, and tens of thousands more are expected in the spillover crowd. Trump campaign senior advisor Mercedes Schlapp says they are taking precautions to protect the president from the virus.
President Trump gets checked for corona regularly. Obviously, he's got his medical doctor on staff, and he's socially distancing. He's not really going to be, near a lot of those individuals who are going to be in the rally.
Health officials in Tulsa had asked the campaign to postpone the rally to protect the public. Dozens of Trump supporters were already gathering outside the Tulsa, Oklahoma arena 2 days ahead of tomorrow's rally. Texas Republican John Cornyn says he plans to introduce legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Texas was the first state to officially mark June 19th as a holiday commemorating the day slaves learned of emancipation. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows a clear majority of Americans support banning the use of chokeholds by police. That same poll shows about 56% of Americans opposed to renaming U.S. military bases that are named for Confederate leaders. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. On a Friday morning, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services. I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation. With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize-change.
Influential conversations from...
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be.
we can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
The WTO has failed America and has failed the international trading system. I think we have to do things very, very differently. I think a number of countries are not treated fairly, but particularly the one that I work for is not treated fairly. So I think we need fundamental reform.
Robert Lighthizer, US Trade Representative, weighing in early this week. What a confusing week it has been for US-China relations. You can throw the Bolton Papers, as Tom Keene would call them, into the mix as well. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, getting you in shape for the market action this Friday morning, with equity futures pushing higher on the S&P 500. We advance 25 points. We advance 0.8% as the team here at Bloomberg reports that China is getting ready to step up its US farm, US ag purchases once again. Phase one, apparently, is on. In the bond market, yields come in up by just a basis point on a 10-year to 0.71%, on a 30-year up a single basis point as well to 149. And in foreign exchange, just to give you a quick feel, a quick snapshot of things, the euro unchanged, sterling weaker again, cable down by around about 0.4%. That's the price action. Tom, June 19th in America, and I think we're all happy to see it observed in a much more prominent way across this nation.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it, John. And of course, so much of this, folks, in New York City is the reopening scheduled for Monday. But there'll be all sorts of events here wrapped around Governor Cuomo making Juneteenth a state holiday. And John, again, this all goes back to Galveston, Texas, in the distance in 1865 from the events of the American Civil War and Appomattox to getting the message out across this nation. And the final message, John, was for Juneteenth, if you will, was in Galveston, Texas in June of 1865. And important comments on freeing the slaves. Joining us now, our chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, an unfair question, but germane to the moment. Are you guessing that Juneteenth will become a national holiday?
Absolutely. In fact, yesterday I spent the day on Capitol Hill, and there are Republicans who are joining the calls for there to be a national holiday as well. It comes in a week in which Speaker Pelosi had, I believe, 4 portraits removed from one of the galleries in the Capitol of former speakers of the House who had ties to the Confederacy. So, I think at this particular point, yes, it absolutely will be within the next couple of years.
Kevin, I must ask one more question of the week, and I know John and Lisa want to drive forward to this change in trade in China, and that would be your date calendar today on the Bolton Papers and the Trump-Bolton legal action. What is your benchmarks through this Friday to get to a decision on the release of that book?
Well, I was struck by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's statement just last night, the Secretary of State saying that he, too, was also in the room. He referred to Bolton as a quote-unquote traitor. So, I think the rhetoric from senior administration officials really ratcheting up. The book's out there. At this point, regardless of whether it's on virtual bookshelves or in brick-and-mortar stores, the book's out there. He's making his rounds, and he's it's out there. It's in the public domain, regardless of what the judge says. And I would just add more broadly speaking. Sorry, Kevin. More broadly speaking, go ahead.
Well, no, Kevin, I want to shift we've been talking about how China-U.S. trade tensions are picking up in part because of the Bolton Papers, in part because President Trump is trying to show a harder line, and ahead of the election, it's a game of who can show a harder stance against China, and yet we have a softening of the stance today. Which is it?
Well, I think that the administration would tell you that they've tried to separate the trade talks from the political talks. And so, even during COVID-19, even before the Bolton book and COVID-19, during the height of the frustration of transparency, lack of transparency coming from China on COVID-19, trade was really a separate issue. So that continues even through the midst of all of this.
Hey, Kevin, we know what the president loves, and it's a campaign rally. We're 24 hours away from one. What is the focus tomorrow for the president of the United States?
This is really this is the first event of the political season. Look, I mean, if you look at the national polls, if you look at swing state polls, has he dug himself out of political holes before? Yes, he has, but he is trailing significantly. And this is really day one, I'm told, from the campaign's perspective. And it's going to be a massive rally. There are going to be prominent Republicans there. Jim Jordan will be there. House members will be there with the president. And it's in many ways a beginning and an opening bid to try to get back some momentum.
Get back to normal as well. I imagine there's a big message about reopening this economy in the mix as well in the next 24 hours. Kevin, stay safe, won't you? Looking forward to the reporting over the weekend as the President of the United States gets those campaign rallies, Tom Keene, back together and pushing forward to November. It's been a real quiet over the last several months because we've been so preoccupied by this pandemic worldwide. But you get the feeling now, Tom, this weekend is where things start to really ramp up and push forward through the summer out to November.
No question about it, John. And it begins this afternoon. I mean, it's going to be amazing, John, to see what the Tots can do against Man U. I think John Peth on defense just really looks good. I'm so psyched to start the weekend with Tots Spurs before we look to Tulsa.
Can I just translate for everyone that might not be familiar with Tom Keene and English football that Tom Keene thinks Spurs, Tottenham, is called the Tots? Lisa, we can leave that one there and move on pretty quickly if you want. Lisa, I think what is really important at the moment for market participants increasingly through the Southside research, it's just starting to move up the page. It's in the bottom paragraph now, but just slowly starting to come up a little bit more. The headwinds, the risks around the election and a composition of Congress, people thinking about those tax cuts that we had a couple of years ago and what's in store a couple of years ahead.
And we aren't talking that much about deglobalization, except for Bridgewater putting out a report yesterday saying that they expect that to potentially eliminate corporate profitability over the next decade. This question of policy, international policy, and how there seems to be consensus on Republican and Democratic sides that there needs to be some sort of amplification of the trend we've already seen. John, that is a big headwind, and I'm trying to just get my hands around exactly how people are factoring this into their models.
One element ahead of November. The other element as well, Tom, that I think we really have to focus on, and this is not a personal judgment, this is a pure observation of the facts at the moment. For market participants, it's not just about the White House, it's about the Senate. That's the big hedge for market participants. If the Senate stays Republican, that will be perceived as market positive. If that is threatened, Tom, then we have a very, very different equation to think about come November.
Well, you see that right now, and you see that within the analysis, the Cook report, looking at Montana of all states. John, Montana's out west. Montana, Grizzly Bears.
Is it?
Montana.
I'll have a look on the map.
Great coffee.
Tom, in the commercial break.
It's a toss-up.
I always appreciate it.
Toss-up.
Coffee. I'm surprised you're going with a non-alcoholic beverage in one of your favorite states. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial. redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing, so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
It's not business as usual right now, but Square has tools to help your business adapt. Like Square Online Store. You can start selling online in a few easy steps with pickup, delivery, and shipping options. And if you are selling in person, you can take contactless payments with hardware like Square Reader and Square Terminal. You'll get your money the very next business day, so you can put it to work. All these Square tools work together, no matter where you're selling, and there's never hidden fees or long-term commitments. Find out how Square can help you get back to business by visiting square.com/UK. Square Up Europe Limited is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority for the provision of payment services.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together, of course, with Lisa Abramowitz, 2 hours away from the opening bow this morning. Good morning to you all. Equity futures advance, looking to add some weight to the gains of the week so far. The S&P 500 back through 3,100, up 27 points, up 8, calling 0.9%. In the bond market, muted session so far for treasuries. Yields up just a couple of basis points to the long end, so just a little bit of mild curve steepening. Your 10-year up 1 basis point to 0.72%. In foreign exchange, quick snapshot of G10 for you. Euro dollar going nowhere. Cable lower. Sterling weaker. Cable down 0.4%. That is a weaker pound against the stronger dollar. That's the price action this morning. This market increasingly focused on some of the fragile pandemic data that we're getting on several states across America. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle for the latest there. Abigail, good morning to you.
Good morning, John. And the global virus numbers really continue to stun. And you were mentioning states. It really seems that state-by-state restrictions are ending in mixed results at this point. Now, if we take a look at what is happening around the world, as of yesterday, there were 8.4 million cases globally. Global deaths now exceed 454,000, nearly 26,000 new cases here in the U.S. yesterday. Really pretty amazing. California saw a record one-day increase. Texas hospitalizations rose for a 7th day. So again, these are big, big numbers. As for more qualitative updates, GlaxoSmithKline's vaccine partnership has started human trials. New York may order and quarantine for visitors from Florida. New Jersey malls will be opening on June 29th. JetBlue is adding some flights here in the New York area. And then American Airlines, get this, will ban any passenger without a face mask. That is sure to create some headlines in the future. John?
Abigail Doolittle, thank you very much. That's the latest on the pandemic. Tom, some real disparity state to state on the process, how we reopen, how quickly, the rules around how we reopen, and what happens next. We used to be on the same page across America. Didn't last too long, Tom.
No, it really didn't. And to your point, really pushing against what Abigail said about the global tone there, John, there's no question there is a massive disparity out there statistically. And I'll be honest, we may have a completely different look, John, come Monday. We get out 3 days. It'll be fascinating to see if, for example, Arizona can actually put a pause on it. And just as importantly, to the Monday opening in New York, another tranche of openings, if New York can sustain the good news. Right now, we have good news, and that is Torsten Slok of Deutsche Bank. He and Peter Hooper have been doing absolutely spectacular work on a global basis, thinking about where we are and thinking about the ramifications of all these actions by central banks. And one of them is this overused word, zombie. The idea of a zombie company, a zombie nation, or even a zombie global economy. Dr. Slok joins us this morning. Torsten Slok, what is the Deutsche Bank distinction when you address the word zombie?
Yeah, so the definition of a zombie company is a company that simply has so much debt, so much leverage, that they do not have enough profits to pay for the debt servicing costs. And the problem is that since the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, when interest rates were very low and zero, it incentivized the corporate sector to go out and borrow. It incentivized an increase in leverage across the non-financial corporate sector. So the consequence was that debt levels have gone up for the last 10 years. And this was a problem even before the pandemic arrived here in March. And therefore, what was the answer from the pandemic once the virus came from policymakers' pandemic? Well, the answer was that when there was no cash flow coming in to the corporate sector, it was substituted by more debt, by more loans in IG, high yield, across the board, commercial paper, and therefore we have just magnified some of these problems that we already had with a significant share of the economy being zombie companies, even before the virus came along in March.
Okay, but Torsten, it's Schumpeterian. We've got to clear the markets. Are we just simply afraid to go bankrupt?
So, I mean, the problem here is that the BIS started looking at this a few years ago, and we have simply just updated what they have done. If you look at the number of listed companies on exchanges in the U.S., that's about 8,000 companies. And look at the share of those that have higher debt servicing costs than they have profits. And here, of course, this is profits before interest payments. That means that the interest coverage ratio for those companies is below 1. Well, that share has now gone up so that of all listed companies, you now have that 20% are now in a situation where they're not able to service their debt. And this is, of course, something that becomes more problematic because the bigger a share you have of companies that don't have enough revenue, the more it will actually hold down the potential growth rate in the economy, the more it will weigh on the outlook for the economy and long-run welfare and long-run standards of living over the next few years.
Torsten, this is the key question, whether we are sacrificing longer-term higher growth, higher productivity for stability now in the near term. And as we repeat that again and again and again, every time we come across a contraction, a pandemic, a recession, whatever it might be, does it make it more difficult to make the opposite decision?
That's exactly right, John. It's a trade-off between the short run. Of course, everything the Fed did was correct. They did save the financial system. They did stabilize financial markets. They have made sure that we don't have this significant amount of volatility and turbulence we had in March. But it has come with a number of side effects. And one side effect is exactly this issue that the lack of revenue, when the doors closed in corporate America and there were no dollars coming into the bottom line, companies turned around to borrowing markets and basically started borrowing in corporate for IG and high yield and commercial paper markets. And that was essentially magnifying a problem that we already had going into the virus. So you're absolutely right. This is increasing the share of companies. This is not only in the U.S., this is also in Germany, France, UK, around the world. The fear, of course, is that we will begin to look somewhat similar to Japan in the 1990s, where you also had very high debt levels in the corporate sector. And this is the problem down the road, that can companies survive these significant amounts of debt load, these significant amounts of leverage that we now have that are being magnified, accelerated upwards because of the response from the Federal Reserve.
There's an irony baked in here, Torsten, or the more that asset prices are kept up and these companies are kept afloat with respect to higher debt loads, the more people can have confidence in investing in these, even though growth is slowing. Do you expect that paradigm to continue, for these zombies to be kept alive and not allowed to go bankrupt, period, full stop, to Tom's point, allowing the asset prices to continue to climb despite the lack of growth?
You're right, Lisa. I mean, think about the Fed's response. What has sort of triggered this lift in the share of companies that are zombies or that don't have enough revenue to pay for their interest payments, that was triggered by low interest rates. And now not only do we again have low interest rates, but we actually also have the Fed actively buying IG and buying fallen angels. And what does that mean? That means that they have also incentivized even further more credit extension and more leverage increase in the corporate sector. And of course, here, non-financials in particular have therefore resolved the problem with the lack of revenue by adding on more debt. So somewhat ironically, we have exactly as John just said, we've been making some trade-offs in the short run. We're stabilizing things, but we still have this very important problem that we need to look at the fundamental structure of the corporate sector. And again, the comparisons with Japan, before it was all about inflation, and that's of course also still a debate, but now there are more parallels with Japan that are coming into the radar screen that becomes very important for investors for thinking about, is it all stocks in the S&P or all listed stocks in the U.S. that needs to go up, or are there very important sector differences in terms of this leverage increase that we have seen in some sectors and not in others?
Torsten, this is not capitalism. We should not pretend it is. What is this?
So I would say, I know this might sound very academic, but I would say this is interfering with the process of creative destruction. I mean, creative destruction is, of course, that some companies go under, some companies open up. Every day on a normal day, there's about 1,600 companies in the U.S. that go out of business. And if you have 1,600 companies that go out of business every day in the U.S., now that artificially IG spreads have been narrowed and also credit spreads have been narrowed and the cost of capital have been lowered, which makes complete sense from a business cycle perspective, this just beginning to open up a lot of questions. What does this mean for the process of creative destructions of companies starting and companies going under? And what does that mean then for how we think about how dynamic the U.S. economy normally is? It's normally the most dynamic economy in the world. It's able to generate a lot of growth and innovative ideas and products and ways of being much more productive than other countries. But the problem is here that now, well, how is that process actually looking going forward if you suddenly have a share and a rising share of the corporate sector that is just no longer able to do those significant increases and advances in innovations and in productivity that we have been so used to for all these years?
Torsten, fascinating conversation and one that we are going to have to continue for a long time to come. Torsten Slok there of Deutsche Bank. Tom Keene, just a remarkable conversation. Creative destruction, transformation, these are the kind of things that you need to see happen. The issue with this is that this was a pandemic. And I think the way the Federal Reserve has approached it is the belief that no one deserved to go under because no one could have seen this coming. Now, not my personal view whether that is the right or wrong approach, but that just seemingly is the approach from policymakers worldwide, Tom.
Well, that acclaimed Deutsche Bank chart that everybody put out, I know Zero Hedge featured it a couple days ago, of the zombification of its economy is extraordinary. And John, all this comes down to is a new kind of capitalism. I love your short question there. Well, then what is this? We don't know, John, yet what this form of modern capitalism is.
I'm not even sure, Lisa, whether we can call this modern capitalism. I have no idea what we should be calling this for the years to come.
My question is, honestly, we have a situation where people who own assets are seeing price gains, where people who work at these companies that are being kept alive with more debt are keeping their jobs. Who's going to push back? Long term, it's theoretical that it prevents this sort of creative destruction that allows a dynamism in a society. But right now, in the here and now, it doesn't seem like there is any political will to push back against the ongoing zombification.
Quite clearly, everyone's accepting the short-term stability. That's the trade-off. That's the sacrifice. You sacrifice higher long-term growth and productivity for short-term stability. And you'd have to be willing to accept a vicious contraction, a vicious amount of bankruptcies. And Tom, that for me is the really, really difficult decision. And the more you put that off, and global economies, developed economies have been putting that off now for a long, long time, the more you put that off, in an economy heavily financialized like this one, I don't think you can ever make that decision anymore, Tom, unless that decision is made for you.
Okay, but I'll go with you, John, but to me, it's what Bob Prince talked about from Bridgewater at Davos, and what Mr. Dalio has underscored in the last few days is this idea, this massive gloom idea of a lost decade. And the optimists push back. They say, who? Says who?
Coming up next on this program, we won't talk about the lost decade. We'll talk about reopening this economy in New York City. Looking forward to our weekly catch-up with the New York Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul. That is coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. It promises to be a huge rally tomorrow, the first public campaign event for President Trump since the pandemic began. The Trump campaign says it is working with officials in Tulsa, Oklahoma to ensure the safety of attendees. Trump campaign advisor Mercedes Schlapp says rally goers will get temperature checks and be given hand sanitizer, and they're recommending they wear masks.
We're going to encourage those who are coming to the rally to put on their masks. Look, I think Americans know best what's best for them and for their families, and of course, taking those safe and responsible measures if they will be attending the rally.
She says the president himself will be social distancing and is being checked regularly for infection. Alabama has seen a spike in COVID-19 cases. Hospital ICU beds are at capacity now, prompting Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed to issue a mandate for all residents in groups of 10 or more to wear masks. He tells ABC News he had to take matters into his own hands.
We just did not have the political will among our city council in order to get it done. And I thought at this point it was something that I had to do by executive order.
That face mask order takes effect today. Alabama's governor, meanwhile, Kay Ivey, has lifted COVID-19 restrictions. Amy Klobuchar dropping out of vice presidential contention, urging Democrat Joe Biden to select a woman of color as his running mate instead. The Minnesota senator tells MSNBC that Biden should take that step to help, quote, heal the nation. Her home state of Minnesota has been in turmoil since the killing of George Floyd by a white Minneapolis police officer. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellett, brought to you by Grainger, offering supplies and solutions for every industry. Visit Grainger.com. The NCAA Division I Council has approved a plan to allow college basketball players to start working with their coaches for the first time since the pandemic wiped out March Madness. The summer access period for men's and women's players begins July 20th. The NCAA basketball tournaments were canceled days before the fields were scheduled to be selected because of the coronavirus outbreak. A National Trade Association for the American ski industry says ski businesses lost at least $2 billion because of the economic collapse caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The Aspen Times reports that the Denver-based National Ski Areas Association says skier visits fell 14% during the latest season compared with the 2018-2019 season. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellett.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Global news 24 hours a day.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're temporarily changing when 60-plus London Oyster photo cards, older persons' freedom passes and English National Concession Scheme passes can be used. From the 15th of June, you will only be able to use these passes from 9 a.m. on weekday mornings. This is to protect those who must travel in the morning peak and allows you to travel at times when you can safely social distance from others. For more information, search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability, mobile data charges may apply.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work from home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
We will be back to where we were in 2019. We will have made up for the lost ground.
Amazing.
It's not going to take 5 years. We will have made it up with some decent numbers by the first quarter of 2021.
Larry Kudlow, National Economic Council Director, Chief Optimist down in Washington, D.C. I say that fondly and kindly of Larry, who we catch up with often on this program and across this network. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. The most optimistic outlook I've seen has got to come from Morgan Stanley, who think that we can recoup a lot of these losses by the end of 2021. I'm not sure how many people share that view. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramovich. Your price action shaping up as follows, Tom. Futures elevated up around about 30 points. We're up 0.9%, a lift going into the opening bow this Friday morning.
There's no question. And John, you nicely framed that is the economics and maybe the financial discussion of a Morgan Stanley or other optimists that are out there. But then there is the reality of opening up, and no one wants to open up with the agony that we've seen down south of large gatherings which maybe lead to potential infection. The Lieutenant Governor of the Empire State has provided leadership on this with her Governor Cuomo to open up in a responsible way. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul joins us this morning. Lieutenant Governor, I want you to give us one anecdote of what it's like to open upstate that people in the bigger cities can understand. What is one of those tension points that's been instructive for you?
Well, thank you for having me on this show again. And I have been all over upstate in person, Rochester down to Jamestown. I was in little tiny Olean yesterday. And I'll tell you what I see. I'm seeing business owners who understand the gravity of the situation. They have been shut down. They've lost their income for 3.5 months. In order for them to survive, they know that they need to, first of all, create an environment that's safe, that you walk in the door, that you're 6 feet apart from other customers, that everybody wears a mask or you don't walk in the door, and there's disinfectant on the counter shops. I've seen it everywhere because here's where this is fascinating. We are all aligned in our interests. Government, those of us who've been leading this charge, Governor Cuomo, first of all, wants to make sure we get it right. The business owners want to get it right. They do not want to be in the news as being the next hot spot or being blown in by their employees or customers as being violators. So the public interest, the business interest, and the government interest are all aligned here to get it right. So I saw countless examples walking down these streets, businesses proud to put up their open for business signs and welcoming people back, and they are being smart about it. And that's all it takes. This is not a complicated concept to keep doing what we've been doing while we've had this slow, well thought out, methodical reopening. And it works here.
It works here. Lieutenant Governor, we hope it continues to work. But you know, we all know, the hard work of this state can be undone by failures elsewhere. What are you doing to protect New York from the outbreaks that we're seeing in other states across this country?
You know, the irony of this is just incredible to consider that just a few months ago, we were the epicenter of this pandemic, and other states were telling their residents not to come to New York, or if you were a New Yorker driving to Florida for your vacation, you were told you had a quarantine for 14 days. So it is extraordinary in the turnaround and the fact that we are now have the state with the lowest rate of infection. So yes, we are concerned. The governor addressed this yesterday when asked about what about places like Florida. What we have in New York State, a lot of New York residents have gone to Florida. They become snowbirds. I guess they're technically Florida residents then, but they come back to their summer homes in the city, the Long Island area, or upstate. And unfortunately, we are starting to see cases where they're bringing the virus now to us. And so the governor is weighing all his options. He's speaking to experts about what rights we have to protect us, because we have suffered too long and we've come back on a long, slow road to get it right. And we're not going to take any steps backward because of what's going on elsewhere if we can help it. You know, New Yorkers cannot go through this twice. Yeah. We will get through this because we're continuing to ask people to follow the social distancing, wear the mask, and we won't end up like the other states. They're literally putting a halt order on some of the reopenings, and that's psychologically devastating, and it's horrible for the economy.
Lieutenant Governor, how close are we to having to actually cut services as a result of the budget deficits in New York State?
It's almost inevitable. I mean, the only lifeline that we're waiting for is to have Congress and the president understand that you cannot have a full economic recovery in this nation without helping out states like New York that were the hardest hit. We are an economic engine that has to get some fuel back into us. And when we get that money and we get that assistance, which we believe should happen, and don't be playing politics. This is not the time to talk about red states and blue states. We are an important entity, an important part of the comeback for the nation, not just our state. So there would be cutbacks. The reality is there will be cutbacks if we don't get that support from the federal government, but the governor has had conversations with the president. We're speaking to our leaders in Congress, and we hope they get it, that we all want this economy to come back. I heard you speaking about, the 10-year decline, and, it's going to take a long time, and it doesn't have to.
Right.
We can come back much quicker and support the federal government spending with revenues from New York, since we are a donor state, but we just need a little help during this time, and we expect to get it.
Lieutenant Governor, very quickly here, I have the clearest memory of the riots of 1964 in Rochester, New York. It has been a path with the courage of Nelson Rockefeller and others to provide for African Americans in this nation and in this state. Are you going to see a national holiday off of what we saw from your governor a few days ago on Juneteenth, 2020?
I can only speak to what we're doing in the state of New York, but I will tell you many times when New York leads, others follow, whether it's the LGBTQ rights, whether it's women's rights, whether it's many of the civil rights initiatives, labor rights, environmental rights. All those movements started in New York, and I hope that the rest of the nation will be aware of what we did in New York by finally giving the recognition that the African Americans deserve to have as part of an important part of their history, which was the Emancipation Proclamation finally being enacted and actually executed in Texas, which was a 2-year holdout. I've marched in Juneteenth parades for the last 25 years. And I'm so delighted to see year after year more people coming out, more people understanding this history and understanding that the root of racism goes back centuries. And it's a time to right that wrong and have an acknowledgement of that dark part of our history, but also realizing that we can come into a brighter era if we become cognizant of that history and why that may still be, the remnants of that are still affecting society today, why there is systemic racism that goes back to that time.
Kathy, I think we all hope we can make more progress. Fantastic to catch up with you, as always. Lieutenant Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul there, on reopening at an important day for this nation. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Brammers. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. As we round out the trading week, equity futures drifting higher, up 30 points on the S&P 500, up around about 1 full percentage point. I said at the top of the hour, this is really a glass half full market at the moment, just taking the good news and running with it and shaking off the bad news time and time again. Up next on this program, becoming a little bit more optimistic, constructive on this market, Bob Michael of JP Morgan Asset Management, next, right here on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey y'all, Jeff Fox.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're temporarily changing when 60-plus London Oyster photo cards, older persons' freedom passes and English National Concession Scheme passes can be used. From the 15th of June, you will only be able to use these passes from 9 a.m. on weekday mornings. This is to protect those who must travel in the morning peak and allows you to travel at times when you can safely social distance from others. For more information, search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The wait is over. Tonight, it's Tottenham v Man United in a top-draw matchup. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
Game on. So, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Remember, 6 feet. It's the rule. Stay your distance and always wear a mask while you're out. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttlepuck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did. They just...
Search Scuttlepuck on TuneIn to listen.
Users in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
No one at this point, analysts, companies, strategists, portfolio managers, has a great sense for what earnings will be in 2020 or in 2021.
The Fed's focus should be on the real economy, and we'll let financial markets take care of themselves.
What we need to realize is that, we're going to be in a slow growth world for a very long period of time.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. It is a Friday in June for many across this nation. It is Juneteenth as we look to Galveston and 1865, or maybe we look to Tulsa in this weekend with the president, the Bolton Papers, a distraction in Washington, and around that, we continue to look at economics, finance, and investment. We've got a terrific guest coming up here just in a moment to frame together all of this is described by the interest rate market. And John, I love what you said in our previous hour about the continued confusion there. I'm almost treating this June 19th, John, like it's end of the half, June 30. We've got to reframe and reframe now.
We really do, and I think it's been really confusing, Tom, over what is happening with the United States and China, especially when you throw in what you call the Bolton Papers into the mix. What is clear, though, overnight coming into this morning, according to our reporting, is that China is planning to ramp up farm purchases. There was a conversation that Secretary Pompeo had with China over the last couple of days that apparently went rather well. We need to see it in the data. That's my point of view at the moment. Let's see if it comes through in the data that they meet this purchase requirements and that phase one actually looks like we achieve something.
A late August mood, of course, some of the volume or just the amount of business being done in equities, folks, is very much dampened. And Lisa Abramowitz, you see that in the quiet in the bond market. What is the distinction you see in the quiet and full faith in credit?
Well, this has been the story, frankly, of the year. The Fed is sitting on bond yields. It's suppressing the borrowing costs for both themselves, for the nation, as well as for companies. And this has led to the risk on feel. I'm trying to get a handle around how much this is contributing to the glass half empty sentiment that John was talking about. The fact that we are seeing viral counts pick up in places like Texas, in Florida, and Arizona, and the market shrugs it off and looks forward.
I'm going to look at the glass half full, Lisa. I'm going to disagree with you on that. We've got glass half full, as we just spoke to the lieutenant governor and opening in New York on Monday. And John, baseball can't do it. American football can't do it. You and I will observe the Tots playing a team from up north here this afternoon. And I believe, let's go Jerry and the Pacemakers ferry across the Mersey. There's a small Liverpool game coming up as well.
The Merseyside derby. Tom Keane, I'm so impressed. Liverpool-Everton later this weekend. Our next guest is so excited about this that he'd rather talk about his beloved Liverpool than he would the bond market. That's the state of affairs at the moment over at JP Morgan, Tom.
Well, it is, absolutely. Let's bring in Bob Michael. This is someone that we know so well from our talk on the yield market and, of course, on the show, The Real Yield. Look for that coming up soon, folks, on Bloomberg Television. Bob Michael, where is the real yield? Bob Michael, when do I get a real yield back?
I know. It just seems to have been another one of these casualties of the crisis. I guess we'll know things are further returning to normal when it comes back, because by then all the value will have been squeezed out of the bond market.
Bob, you sound like you've become more constructive in the last couple of weeks. Can you walk us through whether you have and why?
For sure we have. And when we look at the overwhelming response by policymakers, both monetary and on the fiscal side, it's been dramatic. It's not just been a handful of developed markets. It's been in the emerging markets. In the last couple of days, you've had rate cuts out of Indonesia. You've had a rate cut out of Brazil. You had a rate cut out of Russia. I looked at where Brazil central bank rates are. They're 2.25%. That's where the U.S. was a year ago. So the policymakers have no interest in watching the pandemic continue to shut down the global economy. They're doing everything they can.
Is this a case of there is no alternative for you, that you've got to put this money to work, it needs a return, and the assets that he used to get a return on just aren't there anymore, Bob, or is it something more constructive than that?
It's a combination of both. I love Torsten. I was a little disappointed that in his list of zombies, he didn't list the bond market, because that's where we're headed. Central banks are going to control the level of funding across the system. And it's not just front rates. With yield curve control and unlimited amounts of quantitative ease, they can go across the curve and control the funding rate to their government. And then with purchases of credit, they're controlling the funding rate to the corporate world as well. And, of course, in the U.S., you're also seeing it with households through TALF programs and other things. So there is a commitment to bring rates down ultra low across the system until we close the output gap. And that's years away.
What's the playbook then for investing in a zombied world, in a zombie market, both bonds as well as households and companies?
Well, I think last time I was on, I said, I'm sure Tom has his Samuelson lying around, and I'm sure one of the laws in there was don't fight the Fed. And I'm not fighting the central banks or policymakers in aggregate. So rates are coming down. They've come down a lot. They're going to stay low for a while. We are going to see an acceleration in growth, but until that acceleration materially closes the output gap and you start to see any inflationary pressure, you're not going to see any talk of raising rates. So I think what you do is you continue to extend out into credit, and you try to find companies and borrowers that can operate in a world and an economy that's running at a fraction of what it used to.
Okay, Bob, but this is critically important. And you mentioned Paul Samuelson, 1948. It was a different economy. It was a different America. And the belief that's out there is your world is gains to the elite. How do we have our finance system give us gains that Paul Samuelson saw through the 1950s and into the 1960s for the good of society?
Yeah, and this is one of the effects of the overwhelming monetary response. The initial reaction is to inflate asset prices, and of course the holders of assets are in the upper echelon of the economy, and it could widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I don't know that monetary officials could have or should have done anything better. As I said in the past, I think they should start shifting the narrative, and you're seeing that out of Christine Lagarde and the ECB, which is, what do you want us to do? We're not the first policy response. We're the second policy response. The first policy response was for government officials to shut down their economy. Then we responded by lowering rates and creating liquidity and funding for the system. So we now have brought rates down to a level where public and private borrowers can do something with it as they recover. Let's see what they do with it. Focus your attention there. Are companies going to borrow and buy back shares and raise dividends and make acquisitions, or are they going to invest in CapEx? And how about on the government side? What are we doing there? Are we just going to pile up a deficit, or are we going to actually invest in healthcare and infrastructure? So I think the narrative needs to change a bit here.
Bob, perhaps the narrative needs to also change around the expected returns profile at a time when you've got a lot of pensions still shooting for that 7% bogey. What is an appropriate bogey right now, given the interest rate environment and given that strategy that you were just talking about, invest in companies that can maneuver in a low growth world?
Well, you're right. There are pension funds and there are insurance companies that have long-dated liabilities they have to match. And what's been interesting to me is the Fed support of the curve has been in the front end, somewhat in the intermediate part of the curve, but they're dialing down their purchases in the long end. So we're seeing three curves evolve, and the long end to me looks as though it's being left to plan sponsors, so the pension funds and insurance companies, to negotiate an acceptable rate with some of the borrowers in the market. So long credit. I don't know that you're going to get 7.5% there. I think you're going to be lucky to, be able to book in the 3% area for an ongoing period of time. And I think that forces you to accept that everyone is committed to a recovery. Other markets will continue to appreciate, and this isn't the proper environment to de-risk in. So continue to hold the things that have a bit more upside, whether it's equities or privates or alternatives. And of course, that means an implicit faith that policymakers will continue to get it right.
Hey, Bob, let's end with the important stuff, shall we? 60 seconds left on the clock. Can we get a score from you for this weekend for Liverpool-Everton?
Do you realize that Premier League football has shut down, but the bond market has continued to operate? Now, I'm a buyer of both those markets. So the anticipation has been mouth-watering for me. I'm expecting 3-0 Liverpool.
Bob Michael, always appreciate it. Tom, do you see how that worked there?
No.
When he switches away from the bond market and gets to Liverpool, the energy just comes comes up a little bit.
Yeah, I got teary-eyed. Nil, folks, we're jargon-free. Nil means zero, like shut out.
I think most people understand that, Tom, to be honest with you. Bob Michael at JP Morgan. Bob, always fantastic to catch up with you. Lisa's got to get used to this. This is going to go on for the next couple of months. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Equity futures pushing higher, up 39 points on the S&P. We advanced by 1.24%. I've established a technique with Tom Keene. He speaks and you just keep talking through him. Just keep talking past him. Up later, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, right here on Bloomberg Surveillance.
What are you, my fourth wife? Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. President Trump will hold his first large-scale public campaign rally tomorrow since the pandemic began. The arena seats 20,000 people. Tens of thousands more are expected in the spillover crowd. Trump campaign senior advisor Mercedes Schlapp says they're taking precautions to protect the president from the virus.
President Trump gets checked for corona regularly. Obviously, he's got his medical doctor on staff, and he's socially distancing. He's not really going to be, near a lot of those individuals who are going to be in the rally.
While some cases like New York, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. continue to slowly phase in their reopening plans, other areas are seeing surges in coronavirus. Alabama's caseload still on the rise, alarming healthcare officials in the Montgomery area. Dr. Don Williamson is president of the Alabama Hospital Association, telling ABC News ICUs are at capacity there and more action needs to be taken.
All I know is that if we don't begin to see a decline in transmission, we're never going to have to worry about a second wave because we haven't gotten out of the first wave.
Montgomery's mayor, meanwhile, has issued an executive order requiring groups of 10 or more to wear masks. Alabama's governor, Kay Ivey, has lifted COVID-19 restrictions. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows a clear majority of Americans support banning the use of chokeholds by police. But that same poll shows about 56% of Americans are opposed to renaming U.S. military bases that are named for Confederate leaders. And almost 3/4 of Americans are opposed to the idea of reparations for the descendants of slaves. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile of finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find better solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
People still are trying to figure out what to do with the second half of the year, let alone make big asset allocation shifts that will affect, multi-year horizons. So at this point, I would expect people to continue to ride the risk wave a little bit.
Kate Moore of BlackRock on riding the risk wave, and that is exactly what we are doing this morning. Good morning to you all from New York City alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro together with Lisa Bramwitz. We are live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. In your equity market right now, we are positive 36 points on the S&P 500, up by a little more than 1%, positive advancing 1.16%. The headlines out of Europe getting some attention. This coming from the EU Leaders Summit. It ends, Tom Keene, without consensus on a recovery plan. That is not going to surprise anybody, including this FX market. No big moves on a single currency, Tom, off the back of this headline.
John Farrell, what does that signify to you?
I just think the negotiations continue, and I didn't expect anything to happen today either, Tom. This was really the formal start of a conversation about getting the so-called frugal four to come together with the rest and do more. And I have to be honest with you, Tom, it is going to be really, really difficult. Wherever there's compromise, there are often suboptimal outcomes, and Europe has showed again and again that is what it's vulnerable to doing over the last several decades.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that. Okay, folks, this is the way it works. You put out a book, and then you get blurbs, and there's blurbs, and there's blurbs, and I've done blurbs, and there's other blurbs. But one of the hardest blurbs to earn in the business of economics is the good Dr. Wolf. That would be Martin Wolf at the Financial Times. Martin Wolf says, shut up and read it. It is another short, concise book on China. And that book is by our Tom Orlick, our chief economist at Bloomberg, with decades of experience on China. And Tom, to work off what Martin Wolf says about your important book, it goes on and on and on because of leverage. How leveraged is China as they confront President Trump's Washington?
China took on a huge amount of debt in its response to the great financial crisis, Tom, and that stimulus ran too strong for too long, and that's left them with debt at around 260% of GDP. Huge burden, huge risk, especially facing the COVID crisis, the trade war. The big thesis in my book is, yes, the risk is there, but China's policymakers have unrecognized resources which they can use to manage it.
What's the trade-off here, Tom, as they secure that short-term stability? What are they sacrificing in the long term?
So the difference between China and most other governments in the world is that China is uniquely prepared to put the government balance sheet to work, to support corporates, to support markets, ultimately to support financial stability. And what that means is that a bet on China fundamentally is a bet on China's government's ability to step in. Now, a lot of people think that China's government might run out of steam, might run out of bullets in the next year or two. trade war, COVID. There's a lot of stress that they face. My view is that China's development story still has a long way to run. Yes, government intervention creates distortions, but that's not going to knock over the apple cart.
Tom, some people might be listening to this and looking at the zombification of U.S. markets and European markets and saying, how is China any different with respect to the distortions and sort of the thumb on the scales with leverage increasing in the system?
Yeah, I think that's completely right, Lisa. I don't want to sound kind of too Pollyanna about what's going on in China. Clearly, there are huge problems over there. Clearly, there are huge distortions in the market that come from government intervention. But as the U.S., Europe, Japan increasingly find that in these waves of crises, the central bank, the Ministry of Finance needs to wade in to prevent systemic risk, to keep growth going. What's actually happening now is not China moving close to the Western model of free markets. In some senses, it's the rest of the world moving closer to China's model of extreme and sustained intervention.
Well, Tom, that's what I wanted to come to you on. There was a belief that this system in China had to change. It needed to evolve. Do you just see it as a well-oiled machine now that everyone else starts to try and replicate?
So I think we need to distinguish between the politics and the finance and the economics, John. On the politics, clearly the progress which many people wanted to see towards a sort of more open, more Western, more democratic system just isn't there. On some aspects of the economy, for example, state ownership, there hasn't been the progress that many people think is necessary. But on the finance, on the markets, actually, the PBOC keeps the dial pointed towards reform. So we now have interest rates which are liberalized. We have an exchange rate which is liberalized. We have a more open capital account. And these things, because of the way finance and the liberalization of the finance system kind of filters through the economy and drives gains in efficiency everywhere else, these gains are actually really important for sustaining China's medium-term prospects.
Tom Orlick, I think our viewers and listeners in this simulcast have a good understanding of different figures, the president, the Secretary of State, perhaps the Secretary of Treasury. But I think to too many, Mr. Lighthizer is an enigma. How do the Chinese perceive the leader of our trade initiative?
I think that's a really great question, Tom. And I think one of the striking things about the last 3 or 4 years is the way in which Robert Lighthizer has kind of transitioned from this voice crying out in the wilderness, this guy who refused or said China shouldn't come into the WTO back in 2001, to a really central figure whose view is really shaping U.S.-China relations, shaping views on how the WTO should be operating. So I'm sure the Chinese see Lighthizer as a very tough negotiator. I'm sure they see him as someone who's kind of master of the procedures. But I think they also see him as someone who's really reshaping the perception of global trade and U.S.-China trade in a way which isn't very helpful for Beijing.
Highly respected and highly regarded as well. Tom, very quickly, before we let you go, let's pretend we're not on air. This is a really bold title for a book. What is it about the title that makes you just a little bit nervous? What's the one thing that makes this theory slightly vulnerable?
So the book's China, the Bubble That Never Pops. When I was a younger man, I used to smoke cigarettes and catch buses. And I always knew if I lit a cigarette, a bus was guaranteed to arrive before I'd finished smoking it. Title of my book, China, the Bubble That Never Pops. I'm slightly concerned the bubble is going to pop before I see any royalties. Fingers crossed that's not going to happen. I know surveillance listeners are all rushing out to buy it right now.
I'm sure they are. Hey, Tom, fantastic to catch up with you. And good luck, too. Tom Orlick there, the author of his new book, China, the Bubble That Never Pops. Coming up on this programme, we'll talk markets with Gershon Distenfeld of AllianceBernstein from New York City this morning. Good morning to all worldwide as we close out the trading week. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Elisa Abramovich, with equity futures elevated up by more than 1 percentage point this morning. We advance as we look to add some weight to a weekly gain on US equities. From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda, the power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abram. It's 60 minutes away from the opening bell in New York, with equity futures nicely elevated, just off session highs, advancing around about 30-odd points and up by a little more than 1 full percentage point. In your bond market, quick cross-asset check for you. 10-year Treasury yields higher, curve steeper. We're up 2 basis points, call it 3 on a 10-year to 0.73%. Outside of that, in foreign exchange, keep just a little eye on the euro. Euro advancing 0.2%, even as the EU Leaders Summit ends without consensus on the recovery plan. The message clear now, like it was before this summit. We'll see you in person in July, hopefully. And to round things out for you, Tom Keene, I want to look at crude because I know you're looking at this. Laser focused on WTI, back through $40 a barrel, $40 and up by 3.3% on the session.
40
$40 and up by 3.3% on the session. 40 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 and up by 3.3% on the session. 40
Yeah, I'll defer to the experts out there, Mr. Curry over at Goldman Sachs, Mr. Morris at Citigroup. John, I'm sorry, that is extremely constructive to correlate that over to the strength in stock market. I think it's really, really something. Here's a dirty little secret, folks, and we do this as we migrate through our Friday morning. Lisa Abramowitz had a taper tantrum about 5 days ago and said, we need to do more on credit. John Farrell climbed on board the bandwagon and said, we got to do more on credit because I miss the real yield so much. So as you know, we've done this week a lot on credit. We finished strong with Gershon Distenfeld with Bernstein, and we're thrilled he could join us this morning on the credit market. You know, Gershon, I look at Alliance Bernstein, I look at the institutional perspective you have, and it really comes down to something simple. Are you clipping coupons? Is there any total return out there, or even perchance is this all about not losing money? What is it forward for the next year?
Well, Tom, I think it is important to remember that, you know, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, credit is about clipping coupon. Over long terms, you know, if you clip a coupon and you get your money back at the end of the day, that's a good result. You don't look for huge total returns. The only way you get big total returns is when you have a preceding time where you have big losses. So in 2008, you had a huge, capital loss, and you followed by 2009. You just had experience in the first quarter where you had a huge downturn, and you just had a huge recovery. And we are back to a more coupon clipping type of environment. That is the normal environment for credit, right? 70-80% of the time you clip your coupon. Occasionally, you have a big sell-off, and typically that's followed by a big rally. Everyone was all panicked in March. History tells you time and time again, when you have a sell-off, you want to buy. Now we're back to a more normal environment.
So, Gershon, what's the message here? That if you buy high yield, hold to maturity?
Look, yeah, that really is the message. One of the amazing things, and I think, John, we've talked about this before, is while yield is a terrible predictor, you know, it's amazing. Every time someone says, you know, what's my return going to be in the next 6 to 12 months? Well, look at your yield. It almost never works out that way. It's almost always a lot more or a lot less. However, if you look at the yield versus your next 5 years return, and this goes back 40 years of data, it's striking. We can show you the data. It's almost spot on, meaning whatever your starting yield is, that tends to correlate exceedingly high with your next 5 years return.
What about leverage levels, Gershon? Do they matter in this world right now?
Well, you know, leverage levels matter, but it's hard. It depends on where you are in a cycle. It depends on what, you know, how cyclical the industry and the company is. You know, leverage levels are higher than normal. That does matter, but a lot of that's priced in. You know, we talk about averages. You look at the average yield in the market today at a little over 6%, but that's all over the place, right? Companies that are either have less leverage or can have higher leverage because they're less cyclical, all else being equal, trade at much lower yields. And those that have problems are priced that way. So I don't know that the overall leverage is that big a deal for the marketplace. There is some excess leverage in the investment grade market, and that could be somewhat problematic for at least some of the triple B part of the market. That's actually will continue to be a good thing for the high yield market. Despite what I think is presented sometimes in the financial media, fallen angels are a great thing for the high yield market. There's no such thing as the high yield market being overwhelmed by them. Time and time again, that presents an opportunity as you have forced sellers that have to sell at any price, and all else being equal, that becomes a great opportunity for high yield investors.
So if this is a coupon clipping world and risk is priced in, why not just buy triple C's and get an 11.5% coupon and clip it all the way to maturity?
Well, if it was as simple as you have a bunch of bonds trading at par with 11.5% coupons that had minimal default risk, that would be a strategy. Unfortunately, in order to do that, you're not really buying that. You're buying a bunch of bonds that have a lot lower yields than that probably are fine, but you're also buying bonds that have 20% yields, but they don't really have 20% yields because a lot of those bonds are priced as if they have significant default probabilities, and many of them are going to default, and you're not going to realize those yields. So it's not as simple as just saying you're going to get your 11% yield if you buy that basket of bonds. You're going to have a significant loss rate from that. It's not as if everything is just completely clear in the high yield market. You're going to have a loss rate associated with buying high yield, and the reality is the lower you go down, the higher that loss rate is going to be.
What about leveraged loans? There's concern about concentration, in particular in industries that have been hard hit by the pandemic, as well as a lack of investor protections and leverage ratios that may be way higher than even what is stated based on EBITDA add backs. How big do you think the loss rates are going to be there?
Well, I don't think they're going to be astronomical. I think they're going to be worse than history. This is something that we've talked about for years. It's hard to remember, but up until a couple of years ago, the thesis out there was rates are only going in one direction, and it was the opposite direction of what we've actually experienced. Rates were going up, and people piled money into that market because they thought that the floating rate element was going to protect them. And we spoke at length about how that was a really, really bad thesis, even if rates did go up. But the effect of that was that a lot of issuance got done in that market, and a lot of poor issuance got done. What I mean by poor issuance was more leverage got put in that market than had historically been. So historically, when something went bad in the loan market, you still got 70 or 80 cents back on the dollar. Now, you're already seeing it. When something goes bad now, you're getting somewhat lower recovery. Not anywhere near where you get in high yield, where you probably average 30 cents on the dollar, but lower than the 70 or 80 cents you've gotten. So loss rates are going to be somewhat higher. It's not necessarily disastrous, but worse relative to history. So investors have to acknowledge that. However, the real difference is in the demand. And that's why loans did so well, relatively speaking, in the previous years. This year, you've seen somewhat like $30 billion come into high yield, and you've seen $20 billion go out of loans. And that's making a huge impact on the relative performance of those markets.
Right. Gerson, away from the high yield, there's this thing called investment grade. Most of the yields are under 0.5%. Maybe they're a big, large 1%. And of course, we price them over treasuries as well. I look at those screens in the Bloomberg, and all I can say is every CFO out there has to leverage up or debt up to simply buy down stock, to do greater share buybacks. The money's free. Are we going to see more of this?
Yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't. And look, if you're a CFO today or a CEO and you don't believe that you can find a project with an IRR greater than that cost of capital, what does that say about your outlook for your business? So yeah, I think we are going to continue to see a lot more of that. I think that's very logical.
This is really important, and I apologize, I've got to jump in and ask this question. Many people in this bond market think that the C-suite are going to start doing some heavy lifting for the bondholders, that they come out of this pandemic with a huge pile of debt and they need to work through it. Are you saying that, as Tom points out, it's back to usual and back to normal pretty quickly?
You tell me, John, how many times in history have markets just come out with this great awakening and change their behavior? I mean, I'll give you a simple example we saw. At the very, very beginning, at the end of March, when we were in crisis, the cruise operators had to, they had no revenues. They had to come up with some emergency financing, right? So investors had all the leverage. So they were able to get a tremendous amount of security, able to get covenants that they had that essentially investors hadn't been able to get in years or decades. And how long did that last for? That lasted for a week or two, and then all the momentum switched back to the issuers, and you went right back to business as normal. So, until proven otherwise, people have very, very short memories. So maybe this time is different, but I think there's a long history that says that we're going to be back to business, that we already are back to business as normal, and we will be for the foreseeable future.
Gershon, you're a realist, and we always appreciate your honesty. Gershon Distenfeld there of Alliance Bernstein. Tom, big question on how the C-suite behaves in the months and years to come after this pandemic.
I don't give my opinion out, John, but I think people know just from the tone of my questions. I think we get back to business as usual, quick, and this money is free. I mean, Chairman Powell has made it a free lunch for corporate America.
Yeah, Tom, the last thing I would call you is subtle. You might say that you don't give your opinion, but I think we all get it loud and clear most mornings on a range of topics.
It's 5.5 hours till the tots. I'm having trouble concentrating. You're just excited, John. That's what I know.
I'm sure you are. You take a breather, have a coffee, or a beverage of your choice. From New York City this morning. Good morning.
I'm going to go over here and have a cup of coffee right now.
Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, counting you down to the opening bow with equity futures nicely higher, up 38 points on the S&P 500. We advanced by 1.2%. That's the market action. We need to talk about the social unrest and reopening some of the biggest cities on the planet. Up next on this program, looking forward to a conversation with the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. That is next right here on Bloomberg Surveillance, and we're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. Alabama has seen a spike in COVID-19 cases, hospital ICU beds at capacity now, prompting Montgomery, Alabama Mayor Stephen Reed to issue a mandate for all residents in groups of 10 or more to wear masks. And he tells ABC News he had to take matters into his own hands.
We just did not have the political will among our city council in order to get it done. And I thought at this point it was something that I had to do by executive order.
Access to food has been unequal in America long before the onset of the coronavirus, but the pandemic has now made it worse. The nonprofit Feeding America projects roughly 17 million more people will become food insecure this year, bringing the total to 54 million, and that includes 18 million children. It promises to be a huge rally tomorrow, the first public campaign event for President Trump since the pandemic began. The Trump campaign says it is working with officials in Tulsa, Oklahoma to ensure the safety of attendees. Trump campaign advisor Mercedes Schlapp says rally goers will get temperature checks and will be given hand sanitizer, and they're recommending they wear masks.
We're going to encourage those who are coming to the rally to put on their mask. Look, I think Americans know best what's best for them and for their families, and of course, taking those safe and responsible measures if they will be attending the rally.
She says the president himself will be social distancing and is being checked regularly for infection. President Trump continues to push back against efforts to implement mail-in voting this November. Supporters want to help voters avoid exposure to and spread of the coronavirus, but President Trump reportedly sees mail-in voting as a threat to his winning a second term, telling Politico that if they don't win the lawsuit to prevent the remote voting, they also risk losing the election. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. A lot of activity in the housing market, especially in the suburbs.
It is absolutely crazy right now. We are so busy.
Jay Tooley is president of Leader Bank in Arlington, Massachusetts.
What you have going on is both record volume in terms of refinances because rates are so low, but at the same time, purchase activity is up, even from last year. So it's a very busy time, and there's a lot of activity happening right now.
And Tooley tells Bloomberg Bay State Business suburban homes are selling in just a few days in a scenario that's playing out around the country.
People have been stuck at home for quite a while. If they feel secure in their job, and they've been working from home for the last 3 months, they've realized that they probably need some more space. They might enjoy a yard now. And so we're seeing a lot of people saying, you know what, I want to upgrade or I want to move out and get a little bit more land.
And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Connecting decision makers.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
You've got to stay in the game. You've got to conserve enough cash so that you can get through this difficulty, and get to the point where we finally have a vaccine and people are finally able to go back to traveling the way they have in the past.
Robert Crandall there, the former American Airlines CEO, a fantastic lineup of guests weighing in on this pandemic over the last several months right here on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. We are live. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramis. With equity futures elevated, Mr. Keene, TK, I'll be catching up with Mohammed Al-Arian of Bloomberg Opinion and, of course, of Allianz as we count you down to the opening bell on Bloomberg TV.
It's been a great set of conversations this week, including Mr. Crandall and Dr. Al-Arian here in a moment. We've also looked at the politics of the moment and wrapped it into this horrific pandemic. And right now, we finished strong for the week, or at least for this hour, with the Mayor of London. Sadiq Khan is someone that we have spoken to many times, and with it, the celebration of the London economy. What he knows is the United Kingdom celebrates something America can't do, which is the return of Premier League football. His beloved Liverpool will go out in the field, no doubt with pay cuts involved for all the players. But it's so grim in his London, the mayor has taken a pay cut to signify to the United Kingdom the urgent need for revenues. It is a story for America as well. Mayor Khan, thank you so much for joining us today. How urgent is it that Prime Minister Johnson assist your great city?
It's really important. It's a pleasure to join you and Lisa and Bloomberg TV, but it's really important that governments across the globe, including my country, understand that the recession we're facing could very soon turn into a depression. And that's why we need an active industrial strategy as we come out of lockdown. And although the government's actually been pretty good in helping businesses in relation to staff being furloughed, they've been pretty good in the short term. They need to realise that as businesses come out of the lockdown, they need additional assistance as well. I'll give you two examples, Tom. Many public authorities have lost their tax bases from people who used to pay what we call council tax, now losing losing their jobs, not paying those taxes. But also businesses who used to pay business rates have stopped paying business rates because their businesses have basically been incubated for the last 3 months. That means municipal governments haven't got the funds to provide services. So I've led by example, taking a pay cut, but we need the government to step in for the medium to long term to support not just municipal governments, but businesses too. And I think governments across the globe will have to do this.
I'm reading Wolf Hall right now. Mervyn King and I are rereading this magisterial Hilary Mantel book, and it's the spirit of London mayor in a trading environment of the 16th century. Tell us about the need to reopen trade to London in goods and services. How critical is it to get the Eurostar back? How critical is it to get the airlines up and running again?
It's crucial. I mean, one of the reasons why I say this, I know you're speaking to me from New York, but you'll forgive me, London is the greatest city in the world, is because of the people who come to our city, who make our city great. The students, the tourists, the investors, the businesses, the sports fan. And that stopped over the last 4 months, and we need that to return. I'm very concerned that as the new academic year begins, many undergraduates may not come. I'm very concerned those who are multinationals who have stopped sending their staff here may be risk averse to coming here. I'm very concerned some of our world-leading theatres, which have been closed for the last 4 months, may not reopen till next year. And you all know the world is a smaller place now. Globalization has some disadvantages, but many advantages. And our strength is our diversity, and that comes from our visitors, and that's part of our DNA. And it's really important we safely open our doors again to visitors, to businesses, and to investors, because we want to, return to not business as usual, but I think a new normality. Where we recognise that actually what this pandemic has done is shine a spotlight on the fragility of society and of our business model, and we need to make sure the new normal addresses those issues.
Mayor Khan, I will say that our colleague Jonathan Farrow reminds us of the preeminence of London on a regular basis. I do wonder, going forward, about some of the social unrest that we're seeing in the biggest cities around the world with Black Lives Matter protests in London that have been ongoing. And I'm wondering how this complicates issues that you've been calling for more police at a time with lower budgets and a time with increasing pressure on that presence. How do you go forward here?
You know, the thing, I'm not sure if your American viewers realise this, but the brutal killing of George Floyd didn't just have an impact in Minnesota, Minneapolis and the USA. It had an impact around the world. And if you're a black Londoner, you could relate to the awful way George Floyd was killed, but also black people across the world could, because they endure racism, discrimination and inequality. So although I fully support the Black Lives Matter movement, my concern has been that during a global pandemic, when we're asking people to keep their social distance, we're asking people to stay at home where they can, what they shouldn't be doing is protesting as they are allowed to do, because that may inadvertently lead to the virus spreading. But separately, you're right, Lisa, this has highlighted that actually even in London, the most progressive city in the world, there's racism against black people, discrimination against black people, and inequality faced by black people. And those of us in positions of power and influence can't be tone deaf to that. We've got to understand that, empathise with that, but also take steps to address that. This is a moment which I think we'd kick ourselves if we didn't take advantage of to address the structural racism that still exists around the world in 2020 against black people.
Well, too much to talk about. Mayor Khan, we truly look forward to seeing you when we revisit London soon and again. Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. Lisa, an extraordinary week of conversations here, and I know we'll drive forward the conversation. John coming up with Dr. Alarian as well. But what's really extraordinary to me, Lisa, is to see this city open up a second tranche of opening on Monday. That's got to be a constructive sign.
It absolutely is. There's a question of how many people will actually come back. I've seen estimates that in phase 2, New York City is expecting about 150,000 employees to come back to the city. I do wonder going forward how much the working from home movement is going to remain entrenched, Tom, and how much that's going to change the entire nature of cities, of commercial real estate. These are the big existential questions we can't even begin to answer until we start opening up more substantially.
We're going to see as well. Let me do a data check right now. Futures, I'm going to call it up 40, a little bit below 40, so I'm stretching it there a little bit. But hey, it's Friday. That's all there is to it. And of course, a nice lift to the market, starting with constructive news on China this morning. We have an important special coming up. Our chief financial correspondent, Sonali Basak, in a special tonight on moral hazard and on this extraordinary first 6 months of 2020. Important conversations there to reset for the second half of the year. Again, markets lifting this morning. Oil nicely above 40. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Get your cook on with Asda. With rollbacks on Hellman's Real Mayonnaise, 705 grams was £2.75, now £2. And a 6-pack of Warburton Sandwich Thins was £1, now 75p. Wham bam, add your lunchtime ham. Find thousands of rollbacks across our stores. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Offers end 1st of July.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Friday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. It is Friday. We made it. It is also quadruple witching trading day today, so be ready for some possible volatility, particularly at the close. Futures are higher as investors react to China stepping up to fulfill certain aspects of the phase one trade deal. They're buying soybeans again. Let's get the latest on those equity futures with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this morning?
Energy stocks kind of stand out in early trading. Paul, you've got crude oil back above $40 a barrel in New York trading, and so you're seeing the shares of oil and gas producers moving higher. ExxonMobil up 2.5%. Occidental Petroleum up 5%, and in oil services, Schlumberger up 3%. And Marathon Petroleum higher by 9%. The oil refiner is in talks with potential buyers of its gas station unit Speedway. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, citing unnamed people familiar with the matter. Marathon said this week that it postponed a planned split of Speedway until early next year. And, of course, you have to look at the travel stocks, and they're higher in early trading. You go to the airlines, you see American and Delta up 2.5%, Southwest up 1.5%, United up 3%. And among the cruise lines, Carnival and Royal Caribbean up 3%, Norwegian up 3.5%. Yum China higher by 4.5%. People familiar with the matter said the owner of KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell restaurants filed confidentially to raise about $2 billion in a Hong Kong share sale. Yum would then add a listing on the city's stock exchange. A couple of earnings to talk about. CarMax up 1%. The used car seller's revenue for the fiscal first quarter fell less than analysts expected in a Bloomberg survey, though earnings came up short. And CarMax said sales have rebounded since early April. And Jabil up 4.5%. The electronics manufacturer's fiscal third quarter sales were higher than projections. We've got to deal with one of these so-called blank check companies, Tortoise Acquisition. The shares are up 58% after Tortoise agreed to buy Hillian, a developer of hybrid and electric truck engines. The company's estimated their combined market value at more than $1.5 billion. AMC Entertainment up 10%. The movie theater owner said it plans to reopen most of its U.S. locations on July 15th. AMC is going to follow the lead of rival Cinemark and Marcus, which will start reopening this weekend, and Regal, which will begin on July 10th. Marcus shares, by the way, higher by 4%. And then there are a couple of companies that focus on African-American consumers that have really taken off this week and are adding to their gains today. One of them is Urban One, the ticker for their Class A voting shares, UONE. They're up 65% at the moment. And that class had soared more than 13-fold this week. Urban One's popularity surged among users of the investment app Robinhood. That's according to the website Robin Track. And then you see this company also has non-voting stock, the ticker UONEK. And right now it's the most active security in early trading, and it's up 44%. So further gains for Urban One. And Carver Bancorp as well, a bank that serves African-American customers in New York City. It's up 16% in early trading after rising more than sixfold in the first 4 days of the week.
Urban One back in the day was Radio One, and I took them public back in the 90s. They're the largest African-American radio station group in the country. Just an extraordinary story, and they've expanded into cable television with, it's just a pretty big, interesting urban story for in the media space.
Mm-hmm. Paul, what you forget to tell people is you took Mr. Sarnoff and RCA public a few years.
Not that old.
Before that as well. David Wilson with the look at the equity markets there and, of course, the lift that we see. As always, Bloomberg Surveillance Brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Are you applying for PPP loan forgiveness? Don't leave money on the table or fail an SBA review. Visit CohnResnick.com/loan forgiveness. And we thank Cohn Resnick for their strong support. I am always in awe of our next guest. She, of course, is the driving force behind a hugely reinvigorated and smart Face the Nation. You can see it on CBS Sunday mornings. And, of course, we have the great privilege of hearing it on Bloomberg Radio Sunday afternoons. But that's not why I'm in awe of Margaret Brennan. I'm in awe, Paul, because Margaret Brennan, before Face the Nation on Sunday, will have read the entire book on the First Lady, the entire book by the niece of the Trump family, and will have gotten 2/3 of the way through the Bolton papers without reading the notes as well. Margaret, have you ever seen anything like this, the set of books that are out about a sitting president?
Oh, my goodness. No. And the John Bolton book is right here next to me, and that, I think, makes the point that the attempt to block its publication is a little missing the moment. It is out. This is one of those anticipated first-person memoirs with just incredible detail from a national security official, and it's troubling, a lot of what he sketches out here. And the president is very upset about what has been shared. But we will be talking about this, of course, along with, like you said, I mean, it's just a deluge of news this week. Yes. Supreme Court decisions, the Tulsa rally that we know will be happening on Saturday. We're kind of holding our breath.
Margaret, it's so important, and just to stay on the Bolton papers for one more moment before Paul Sweeney segues to something more important, and that is, I spoke with Ambassador Blackwell, of course, his public service to the nation for Condoleezza Rice, and the go-between, if you will, between Mr. Bremer and a brutal Baghdad and the White House long ago and far away, and he was heated. It was inappropriate to do a book deal off of what were a lot of private conversations and listening in. I mean, there's a whole school of thought out there that says this is just an inappropriate book. How much of that pervades your Washington?
No, you're right. I mean, certainly, and if we're going by the standards of a normal presidency, and President Trump has made a virtue of upending normal presidencies, the standards there has been this unwritten rule that you don't talk about conversations that you have with the commander-in-chief, even when the information itself isn't highly classified, as the Trump administration is arguing many of these details are. But for John Bolton, who, as you indicate there, he's got enemies on both sides of the aisle and harsh critics here. But for him, he has made this argument that what he is describing to the public 5 months before we go to the polls in an election year is central in terms of judging fitness for the office. He describes a lack of willingness of reading, of doing homework to prepare for meetings, something that a number of Trump administration officials have said after they've left office. And he describes dangerous conversations. I mean, he makes incredible allegations that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said amount to him being a traitor, even alleging that the president, to Xi Jinping, the president of China, greenlit the creation of concentration camps for Muslim minorities. I mean, it's mind-blowing, some of the allegations in here. But one thing I will say, as someone who has followed John Bolton for some time, he is a man who takes notes. He is a career bureaucrat and diplomat, and he is usually fairly careful in terms of paper trail. So you have to imagine that this is based on something.
Margaret, we are, as you mentioned, 5 months away from the election. Many polls coming out just recently really showing former Vice President Biden with a substantial and maybe growing lead over President Trump. What's the feeling within the Beltway as to the validity of those polls and kind of how November might play out here?
Well, as you are mentioning, there have been a number of polls that show, even in states like Iowa, where the president has, led in the last election and certainly seems to have a strong following, the margin between him and Joe Biden is pretty narrow. And while that is heartening for the Biden campaign, I don't know of anyone who will speak with any certainty these days of what's going to happen tomorrow or next week versus what's going to happen in November.
That's a good point.
I mean, how many black swans?
Right.
We had a flock of them. So there is that. But I will say there is concern that some of the president's recent actions and certainly this defining crisis of his presidency, how he handles the pandemic, may not be in his favor.
Margaret Brennan, what will you watch for Saturday? It is going to be an event. I understand the stagecraft. I see the headlines of Washington Post featuring the idea they need health permits or a health plan, whatever. But what are you going to try to observe in the president's actions and comments in Tulsa?
I think everyone's holding their breath. This is the first rally in 3 months. As you said, Tulsa health officials have made clear they wish this rally weren't happening indoors with optional mask wearing. They don't want to reignite an outbreak or ignite one. They're having a spike in that city, though the rest of the state has brought down numbers. But I'll be listening for who the president takes aim at. You know, these rallies, these aren't prepared speeches. He ad-libs. He goes off script. And he feeds off of a very lively audience. And if you are going into this environment at this time when health officials tell you avoid crowds at all costs and you're walking in the front door, you are not the middle-of-the-road voter that the president's trying to persuade. You are part of his base. And so this is likely to be full of red meat. It is an incredibly emotionally charged moment, particularly given that today is Juneteenth and Tulsa was the site of the worst massacre of black Americans by white Americans in our history, documented history. So there's a lot of concern that there could be some clashes.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much. Look forward to that. You can see Face the Nation Sunday morning across the CBS television networks. And, of course, we're thrilled to bring you Face the Nation Sunday, 2 p.m. in New York, Washington, D.C., and Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport as well. Face the Nation, 2 o'clock Sunday, hugely successful for us. Right now with our news in Washington, here's Amy Morris.
All right, thank you, Tom. And you and Margaret were just talking about tomorrow's Trump campaign rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We can tell you that dozens of Trump supporters are already lined up outside that venue for what promises to be a huge rally, the president's first in-person campaign event during the coronavirus pandemic. Some are camping in tents, others marking their place in line, sitting on chairs, like Sue Williams, who is not worried about getting infected.
I've been praying, and I don't believe I'm going to get the coronavirus.
As many as 20,000 people will be inside the arena. Tens of thousands are expected outside. Access to food has been unequal in America long before the onset of the coronavirus. The pandemic has made it worse, though. The nonprofit Feeding America projects roughly 17 million more people will become food insecure this year, bringing the total to 54 million, which includes 18 million children. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows a clear majority of Americans support banning the use of chokeholds by police. That same poll shows about 56% of Americans are opposed to renaming U.S. military bases that are named for Confederate leaders. Texas Republican John Cornyn says he plans to introduce legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Brandeis University history professor Lee Wright-Rigueur.
In a lot of ways, we might even think about it as something akin to the 4th of July for African Americans, because it is about freedom and it is about the reality of freedom and that enforcement of freedom.
Currently, 47 of 50 U.S. states and the District of Columbia recognize Juneteenth as an official holiday or observance. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Looking at the futures here, S&P up about 1.2%, Dow up about 1.4%, NASDAQ up 1%. We have green on the screen here. We will bring the market open to you in just moments. This is Bloomberg.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband, Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
A day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And 9:17 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash, brought to you by National Realty, NRIA, developers of high-return income-producing properties for investor partners. See them at nria.net. We are seeing green on the screen as we prepare for the cash open on Wall Street. Dow futures right now up 371 points, a rise of 1.4%. S&P futures up 40, that's up 1.3%. The Nasdaq E-mini futures up 107 points, that is up 1%. After kind of a brief swoon, equity markets back in rally mode. Investors seem to be betting that governments are going to be able to put the economies back on track with enough stimulus at their disposal. You have U.S., European benchmarks clawing back nearly all of last week's losses that were brought on by concern over a second wave of coronavirus infections. Also, keep an eye on some of the energy-related shares. ExxonMobil, that's up 2.7%. As you're seeing a rally in crude oil, up 3.4%. West Texas at $40.18 a barrel. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. This is an interesting conversation. There have been a lot of conversations with the staff of Johns Hopkins. We've talked to Baylor University, UCL, and Imperial College in the United Kingdom, and many others. But this is timely for this weekend in Tulsa. The epidemiology of this virus, this pandemic, will be tested. Here is Andrew Pekos on our testing of the coronavirus.
Yeah, I think the first and most important thing is testing is a good thing. Rarely does testing give you information that is bad, right? We want to try to make sure we're testing as many people as possible. We also want to know not only the total number of cases, but the percent of people that are coming in for testing that are positive for the virus. Those are two very different numbers, and they help us figure out where we are in terms of being able to control the infection. So we need to do more testing. We need to follow up that testing with more of this contact tracing so that when we find individuals that are positive for the virus, we can go back and identify their contacts and try to get them to self-isolate and minimize transmission. That's the way that we're going to get out of leading public health interventions to get the economy going again.
Dr. Pekash, what does it mean for the hospitals of Tulsa when you see 50 or 500 or dare say 19,000 people stacked in together at an event, some with masks and too many without masks? What does that signal to the medical community of Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Well, we know that the numbers of cases can take anywhere up to 2 weeks before you really understand how a particular event has mediated transmission. So these kind of things, and we're seeing that with some of the numbers in terms of the economic, in opening up in the economy. We're seeing this slow increase because this virus takes anywhere up to, sometimes up to 10 to 14 days before you start showing symptoms after an exposure. And you can still be transmissible during that time. So this is going to be one of the key critical events that needs to be followed for several weeks to make sure that hospital capacities are up to par to be able to deal with this potential surge in cases.
But the president said testing is overrated. Is it?
No, testing is absolutely critical. I can't emphasize that enough. We need to know who's infected. We need to follow the population in terms of what percentage of people that are showing symptoms are actually infected with the virus. Those are the critical things that are going to help us open up the economy. Other countries have shown that if you can get the percent of tests down to a level CDC recommends 5% or so, it's easier to keep the virus at that level than it is to keep it at a level that's higher than that. And I think we're seeing that with some of the states that have opened up their economies and not reached that level of 5% testing. It's hard to keep the virus down if you've got hundreds or thousands of people that are walking around infected.
Andrew, does antibody testing work? So we've had so many false negatives. Does it actually paint a clear picture of how many people have had it? So this is different to testing on whether you have COVID-19 at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Antibody tests are also a critical component to try to understand who has been exposed and to catch those cases that were missed in terms of the initial testing for the virus. I think we're learning that there are a lot of kits out there that test for antibodies. Some are good, some are bad. Public health agencies and hospitals are sorting through that information and starting to use the good kits to get a good sense of measuring antibodies. We're going to know in the next 2 or 3 weeks a lot more about what an antibody test is really telling us about your protection from infection, because there's a lot of groups that are studying this right now. All the signs so far look good. If you have a strong antibody response, that's probably going to be associated with protection. But some of these studies are right now working their way through the peer review process, and we'll see them in the next couple of weeks.
Dr. Pekash, we found a drug that actually helps in people that are getting very sick from dying. There's also this convalescent plasma therapy, which is basically injecting people that, with antibodies. Like, how much have we made progress in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so convalescent plasma therapy is one of the bright spots in terms of treatments for COVID-19 patients. A number of studies have come out suggesting that there's a benefit to giving individuals this plasma. It reduces mortality rates. It speeds up recovery. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to get this implemented across the country. But all signs point to plasma therapy as being a great, I call it a stopgap measure, because There are better antibody therapies in the pipeline, but right now, plasma therapy is what we can use, and I think the use of that is going to expand significantly given the good results that we've seen treating patients that have severe disease.
Now, what we like to do best, bring you experts on all of these different themes, and this, of course, on this horrific pandemic. Andrew Peckhouse with the Johns Hopkins University in their School of Public Health. Paul Sweeney, the public health of the market's extraordinary. I just looked back at a 3-day chart of the Dow, and we're not back to, recent highs, but the vector is up. Are we on the edge, Paul Sweeney, of a melt-up?
It's interesting, Tom. I think the market,